podcast.
Cool. You got the headphones there?
All right, let's get strapped in.
Yeah. Here we are. Voice of Electronic Music podcast, episode number 46 with Dominic M.
Well, cheers. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Cheers. How you doing?
Really good.
Yeah. I guess this will be the official Christmas podcast edition. We've got the Christmas lights and the snowflakes and Sam Adams beer. They're not a sponsor, but it's always been kind of my go-to holiday beer for some reason.
Well, that's good. We'll get pretty festive as this goes on.
There you go. I like it. Cool, man. Well, thanks for coming down. I guess I should give you a little bit of a intro here. So, Dominic is a resident DJ here at Halcyon, and that's how I met him, and a pretty prominent DJ here in San Francisco, and he plays lots of after hours, and also a techno producer as well.
Yeah, it's been really nice. Halcyon in particular has been really special for me. We've done some really good shows this year and have a pretty good community. We've had some nice holiday parties. So we've really, we have a good team now. It's really fun. Yeah. It's the community here is really pretty special, which is what I love about it. And I guess too, the community in kind of the entire San Francisco Bay Area has just been really great in the last 5 or 8 years. And I feel like especially right now, I've been a part of many. I've been kind of privileged to be a part of many different music scenes over the years, and I think this is the best it's ever been. You know what I mean? It really feel good. There's a lot of positivity and not a lot of hating and that sort of thing, and just really feel good. I think so too. It's really funny because for me, I came here about 3 years ago, and things happened really quickly. I think San Francisco is a city where people are very receptive and supportive, and you can be local and up and coming and be pretty widely received and supported. I also think too that the culture here, it's very different than San Diego or LA, where I'm from. SoCal, I will say, is a little bit more cutthroat. LA, particularly, because so many people want to be in the entertainment industry, is kind of the vibe where, if someone could sort of step on you to get where they want to go, they'll do it. But here, I think the sense of community is very special, and that's what really draws me to San Francisco. And for me, it's home now. I love going back to SoCal, and I'll be there for the holidays, but I'm always itching to get back after a little while.
Right. Did you play much when you were in SoCal, LA and stuff?
No, not really. It's funny because I actually spent a few months back in San Diego. I went back to school last year and ended up meeting a lot of people in the scene out there. But the thing with San Diego in particular is that it's really conservative. There isn't a very strong underground scene. There's one club, Spin, that does some pretty good bookings, and then they have Cross that does the festival. They're pretty big promoter. They almost have a monopoly on house and techno. But if you're sort of a local DJ and you want to just particularly do underground music, there's not really an audience for it like there is here. Yeah. So it's very different. Much more of an EDM kind of culture with the clubs. Yeah.
I could see that. There's a bigger military presence down there, and definitely more conservative. And San Francisco has always been kind of a real hub for music. And I don't know. They're both ports. San Diego's a port. So is San Francisco. So I'm not sure why. I've always been curious, what made San Francisco kind of the breeding ground for all these creative ideas. You know what I mean? It's interesting.
It is really interesting. The other thing, too, with San Francisco is that we have the really strong and vibrant gay community. And so particularly with house and disco, historically, that's why it's always popped off here. And, we have a lot of the really strong kind of old school San Francisco DJs who have been in the scene playing for 30 and 40 years. That's why we have, DJs like Mark Farina and Doc Martin who are out here regularly, and they're old
still
friends
live here.
With some of those DJs. So it's really special, actually. And I think the other thing too is that when a lot of those DJs play here, they can really do that old school sound that is sort of like home for them. Right. We had Mark Farina's birthday here, for example. That was a really, really good party.
Yeah, the all vinyl night.
Yeah, that was cool.
There's something so special about seeing the little lights on each turntable, and they kind of have that amber glow to them, like an old candle or something. And it's just, I don't know, it has a different. And then of course it's vinyl, so it's very warm and analog-y sounding. But there's something special about that, I mean,
Yeah.
you get that a little bit with these, but there's a more digital edge with the screens and the LEDs and that sort of thing,
Yeah, it's very different. I mean, one thing too that I'm actually always telling people is with these, there's the temptation to kind of mix with your eyes a bit. There's a lot of people that I notice they're really staring at the screens and they're not actually listening in the headphones.
Oh, yeah.
Which is kind of a detriment. I really try not to do that. I actually, particularly with Rekordbox, I actually deliberately don't spend a lot of time adjusting things because there's really no need to. You just need to have the music loaded and, again, that's why you have jog wheels and that kind of a thing. So I'm not trying to, line up B grids.
Make sure everything's gridded perfectly and, yeah.
You don't need to. That's why you have ears.
Right. Exactly, yeah. Totally. And, it builds a certain amount of technical skill, too, I've told this story a few times in the podcast, but I recently kind of started playing out again, DJing. I took like a 4 or 5 year break there, and getting back into it, I had to re-download all new music. I still had my old stuff, but a lot of it was more kind of like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, like electro-y stuff. In doing that, I just kind of like, all right, here, just loaded up a bunch of stuff that I found on my USB, and of course didn't have the time to really dive deep and make sure everything was perfect. And so track names are off, and like the grids aren't perfect, and just hopping in there and playing on it, like all those kind of, it's like riding a bike, like all those skills come back. You're like, oh yeah, oh shit, okay, well let me just fix that. Let me make sure this is aligned. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like riding with the training wheels off, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually had a really funny experience. About a month ago, I was actually next door at Audio. One of the owners was there, and he had a friend who, was kind of telling me a little bit about his life. He used to DJ and had the situation happen where he was going to open for, I think, Dubfire, and he had this bad feeling about his dad. So he ended up canceling on the gig, going to see his dad, and then he died. So he stopped playing. And we start talking, and I have my music there, and he asked if he could play with me. He hadn't been on the decks for like 4 or 5 years. And it was really funny, the first few mixes he did, he kind of was uncomfortable, and I was kind of showing him like how the new Nexuses work.
Yeah.
And then I just stepped back, and he just started killing it. And it's really funny how it can really come back to you after a few years. You just get in the flow, and you get to the point where you're not thinking about technical stuff. It becomes sensory, and you actually relax and kind of meditate.
All right.
And so that was cool to see, actually. Those
muscle memory.
Oh, yeah. That was fun.
Yeah. That's awesome. So, you mentioned that you came up here from San Diego. What was it like for you to kind of get started in this city, and like how'd you do it? Because I think that's what a lot of people are kind of curious. How do they get started in their scene and that sort of thing?
So my college roommate is from the Bay Area, and I have a lot of friends from UCSB where I went to college who live up here. So at one point, I took a job out here, and I pretty much just had him as a friend, and then there's this girl, Mighty, who was sort of my best friend, and she's the one who actually took me to Halcyon for the first time. The first party they did here, I think, was for the soft opening. It wasn't the grand opening night with Dubfire Joseph Capriati. They did I think a Pink Elephant party, and she knew one of the bouncers, and so we got in. And I remember the first time I came in here, I really had this good sense, like this place, it was going to be very, very special.
Yeah.
So, it's funny to think, like, yeah, at one point I pretty much just had one friend who I was going out with, but she's very social, so she introduced me to a lot of people, like David Paul, for example, who also plays here quite a bit. She really knows a lot of people in the industry, so she helped me out quite a bit as far as making those introductions. And then as I got more comfortable and that kind of a thing, I just really started to, go to parties and just meet people organically. Particularly if I had a really good time at a party, I wouldn't be shy about, because I do tend to stick around till the end of the night. So I'll go and I'll thank people for, what they've put on, or, for doing a really good event and that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And then eventually they get to know you, and, that's kind of how it kicked off. Just being really outgoing. The other thing too about moving to a new city is you can kind of, in a way, reinvent yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things that I wanted to work on, particularly when I moved out here, I was, I think, 24 at the time, is, just having more of sort of a presence and being a little bit bolder and that kind of a thing. So that's helped me quite a bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, you definitely kind of you need to. I mean, it's tough to be a wallflower and make it, in any industry really. You kind of just have to, force your way, into some of those scenes. Not force your way, but make sure you're there and show up and be a part of it. You know what I mean? Even if that, it was a lot of producers especially just spend all their time like in the studio or whatever, just working on music and that sort of thing, and it can be a little bit challenging at times to get out there. I mean, it requires effort. You have to get out there and kind of put yourself out there and talk to random people and kind of But I think if you show up someplace enough times, people will start recognizing you, and that's kind of how I did it too. You just start showing up, and then a couple months go by, and like all of a sudden you're a part of the thing.
Yeah, I mean, the importance of showing up actually really can't be understated. If there's a party that you really vibe with and you think has the aesthetic that you just resonate with and you want to be part of it, a lot of promoters are very willing to reciprocate. If you're there and you support, that's really what has helped me quite a bit. I've never been the type of person where I've shown up to someone's party because I wanted to get booked. It was not that at all.
Yeah.
Even with Halcyon, what I used to do is, I mean, back when it first started, we were just doing these crazy nights where it would go, Dubfire and Joseph Capriati were until like 10 a.m. I think the record here is Chus and Ceballos played, I think, full 12 hours. So they did midnight to noon. So there have been some really long ones here. But yeah, I was just here, and I was showing up for about a year and a half, and also doing some of the Afterhours events before Gina approached me about having me play. And I was very surprised and humbled, and really grateful for that. But it really can't be understated that people will reciprocate and they appreciate support. The other thing too is that when you're out there and you're connecting with people, that's how you have draw.
Yeah.
And it is kind of unfortunate to say this because some people really don't like this, but as a DJ, particularly in a local scene, you do need to have pull. That's ultimately what will get you booked.
Yeah.
That's what will be attractive to promoters, because it is a business. It's an art as well, but you kind of have to see it from their point of view. In San Francisco in particular, because of the way that the rents are for venues, it's expensive to do a party. I mean, I think people have this idea that promoters are walking away, like Scrooge McDuck, and they're just diving into a pile of money at the end of the night.
Duffel bags of cash.
But I know for a fact it's not the case. I've done several events with my friends, and we've taken a loss because we just wanted to do a really good party.
Yeah.
And people don't really realize that that's the case. But
right.
Being out there, especially connecting with people, is what they're attracted to. They'll go support you just because they're your friend. But especially if you play well and they really resonate with your music, that's how you start to really, blow up and sort of, expand in a scene. So
Right. Yeah, it's difficult, because a lot of times, if it's some little bar, kind of on the outskirts or whatever, it can be difficult to get people out. It's a little bit easier when it's at a place like Halcyon or a nightclub of that sort. But not unimpossible, you know what I mean, or non-possible. Like my buddy and I threw a party out in a Milk Bar, all the way out in, deep the end of the Haight-Ashbury district, and we got, it was on a Monday night, no less, and we got. I mean, maybe that's a testament to how much of a scene that San Francisco has. You can have a party that far out there on a Monday night and still get a considerable amount of people. But it can be done, and I think a lot of DJs kind of shy away at the, it can feel a little sleazy at times, sending out Facebook invites. And then you're battling with Facebook too. Like, you're just trying to send out these invites, and then Facebook like puts a cap on you or like blocks you for trying to invite people to your party, and you're like, God damn it, like, you just can't win,
Yeah, Mark Zuckerberg is not very kind to us, I will say that.
You're right.
It's funny because when I first started doing events 3 years ago, they weren't aggressively banning you for doing too many invites and capping you and that kind of a thing. But as their business model sort of shifted where they really want you to do these sponsored ads and that kind of a thing, I mean, it really is for the money. It's not because they think that you're harassing people or whatever with these invites. They just want you to pay. So That's been pretty interesting. I have some little tips, as far as how that goes. One thing in particular is when you do, I'm able to do 500 or so invites at a time, but you do that and then you just can't do any more invites for like 2 or 3 weeks. So things like that will
wow.
help. But it's funny how it is, especially when I do events, I almost have to schedule the invite promo so that I don't get banned. Or when they cap you at 50, what you know is that you're in the hot seat, so you just don't do any invites. And then 3 weeks later, they'll lift it, so then you're able to actually get out there again. But it's crazy that we have to navigate these kinds of things, honestly. Right. It's absurd.
You would think that they would have figured out some I mean, some way to do that without having to battle this banning and that sort of thing. I mean, what do they want people to just pay for ads to promote? I mean, is that?
That's pretty much the deal. Yeah, they're money hungry, and so.
But then you're just relying on this ad that people may or may not see. You don't know with an invite. Okay, all these people, it's going to their notifications. You know what I mean? And that's a very direct way. But if you just threw out this ad, like there's almost no way of knowing if that's even hitting the people that you are trying to reach to.
Oh yeah, it's tough. Another thing too that's a good sort of promoter tip I have is DMing people is never a bad call, but you don't want to do this copy paste kind of a thing.
No.
If you have actual friends or people that and you're on at least a first name basis with them, take the time to actually send them a real message and say, hey, so and so, like, would really like to see you. Actually make a personal message. People will connect with that a lot better, and they know, for example, if you're just doing a copy paste spam, and people are a bit unattracted to that. They really don't like it. So
you just gloss over it. It's like you. It's amazing how nuanced that is, and people can definitely pick up on it. It's if someone sends me a message that is very clearly copy and paste, I just I'll glance at it, but that's about it. And it's like some people even like change the first name, just saying hey. They'll be like hey Scott or whatever. Even that's not enough. That like really being it like and I I've done it myself, taking the time to individually, even if it feels ridiculous, but retyping all the stuff out. And of course, you're going to copy and paste the link or whatever. But it's kind of an art to making that feel not so spammy, I guess.
Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, particularly for a club or that kind of event, a really good poll is like 30, 40 people for a club. If it's an after-hours event or that kind of a thing, 20 is good.
Right.
That kind of a thing. But you have to also realize, you have good friends that will come. Mm-hmm. So even if you can just attract another 10 or 12, that is a really good impression. You're not expected to pack the place solo. There's some events I've done here where I've been able to pull, 40, 50 people at least. But that's just because of the other parties that I do. And, luckily, the one thing I will say is that San Francisco has been really, really good to me. It's really, for me, just special that people have taken to me really well, and that I have people that really, just enjoy my sets and they come out, and I just have such a good time. I mean, it's really emboldened me and empowered me and just raised my confidence. And this year in particular, it's funny, a lot of people have said that 2019 has been a tough year for them. It definitely was for me for a lot of personal reasons, but the happiest times that I've had have definitely been up on the decks or out on the dance floor with people. And the other thing, too, that I realized over time is San Francisco in particular, people were working really hard. These tech jobs are not for the faint of heart at all. I mean, I have a lot of friends that are working really long hours and that kind of a thing. So the weekend, in particular, for underground music lovers, it's really their time to actually relax, and it's very special for them. And that's, again, why we have a lot of friends who just stay out, almost the whole weekend. I mean, they love it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's such a, maybe not so much lately, but I feel like for a while there, it was just all you would read about on, Facebook or whatever, or Twitter was just like, all these, the tech bros in San Francisco and the tech culture kind of, and, I'll be the first to say it has displaced a lot of things, right? Like living here is not cheap, and it can be difficult for a number of reasons, parking and expense of everything and that sort of thing. But I guess the flip side of that, the other side of the coin is that, just like you said, like there's a lot of people that are playing, their favorite techno Spotify playlists at their desk, and then the first thing that they want to do is get out and get to the club, and whether it's some small place or here or after hours or whatever, and they're really kind of dedicated. It's like this converse. I don't know. I think it's not entirely a bad thing.
Oh yeah, it's funny. My day job, which I share with people sometimes, is I'm actually a teacher. So I'm not raking in this kind of tech money at all. My salary is very much middle class, but I love it. I love what I do. Pretty much all the time I'm happy, and I have a really fun time with the kids and that kind of a thing. I teach math and science and computer science as well. So that's always been fun. And I've done it for a long time. I actually started when I was 22. So I was a really, really young teacher. I was in San Diego at the time. I was teaching at a school that was by the U.S.-Mexico border. Really tough neighborhood. A lot of the kids' parents were in gangs and just had some really tough situations going on. But I think what I did and realized that first year is that I really made good connections with those kids who came from a very different background than I did. Yeah. And actually, a lot of those skills have transferred to what I've done, sort of in this entertainment industry, is that, again, connecting with people is very special. Networking and that kind of a thing is everything in this industry.
Right.
And people will be attracted and magnetized to someone who they really vibe with. But the other thing, too, and this kind of goes back to my first point, is that for a lot of people, this music and being able to go out is very therapeutic for them. It's how they unwind. And in that sense, I really, sort of have taken a point to bond with people and talk about them and, just really connect in that sense with people. And there have also been some really funny incidences. I had someone tell me that I saved them at a party recently. They were going through kind of a hard time, and I just took the time to kind of sit and talk to them and that sort of thing. And it happens, sometimes you go out and you're stressed out or something's really bothering you and you just don't want to be alone. So those kinds of things actually mean a lot.
That's awesome. You're probably that cool teacher. I remember in high school we had a teacher, and he it was rumored that he was I went to school. I grew up in Walnut Creek on the other side of the tunnel there, and it was rumored that he was a San Francisco bartender. And he was a good-looking dude, so all the chicks were like, oh, I can't remember his name, but Mr. So-and-so, you know what I mean? And just the fact that he was like a San Francisco bartender, on the weekends or whatever, was like, made him really cool and mysterious. So I would imagine you get a bit of that. But you had mentioned, like salary and being kind of, living modestly. Like, I'm a firm believer, too, that there's, not everything is, you can't put a dollar amount on everything. You know what I mean? Like this job, for instance, is fantastic. It's one of the best jobs. I think it's the best job I've ever had. Difficult for sure at times. Having to give up weekends and that sort of thing, and stay up until 4 a.m. minimum most nights. Can be tricky, but and not the most money I've ever made, but. Then again, I'm working, for sure, two nights a week. I also do maintenance around here and just general, things that need to be fixed and that sort of thing. But, having the most of the week to be able to do stuff like this and to, do my music and that sort of thing. Like, there's a wealth in that. You know what I mean? Like, which is almost invaluable to me. And so I feel like I'm making $1 million because I'm able to do. Life is sustainable. It's enjoyable. I love it. I'm surrounded by some of the best people ever. You know what I mean? And I'm knee deep, eyes deep in a scene that I love. And I have this time to do these other things. Oh
yeah, that's really incredible. Yeah. I think too. For me, I knew pretty early on that I was not the type of person that wanted to work an office job and that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
I remember in 4th grade, actually, my 4th grade teacher told me that I would probably end up being a teacher one day. So, yeah, definitely, she called it. That was funny. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, I mean, I think for me in particular, what I do is technically social work in a way, and then this is not quite that, but, definitely has a lot to do with people. People really energize me and that kind of a thing. I don't like to be alone. I get really I get bored and anxious. Like I have to be with people all the time.
Yeah.
I grew up in a big family. You know, it was me and 3 siblings, and you know we're all pretty close in age. My youngest brother is 10 years younger than me, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean we were always the house where we had people over, and I always had people sleeping over every weekend and that kind of a thing. So yeah, I just it's fun for me. I just I just love people.
It keeps you young, you know. My brother and sister are both 12 years younger. They're twins. And so it definitely kind of, I don't know, yeah, I guess it keeps you young. I don't know. I personally, I guess I kind of felt like, I kind of already like had kids in a way, because when I was 12, they were being born, and then I'm 18, and they're, 4 years old or whatever. And so like I kind of got to experience that, and it took a while before we were really able to connect, because there was that at 18, what am I going to talk about when they're 4?
That's true.
They're just barely talking in general. But now they're both, 25, and it's pretty cool. It's fun to be able to relate. My brother and I went to Symbiosis a number of years ago.
Oh, that's funny.
Which is great. Yeah, that was a really good long time to hang out and bond. And he's into electronic music and stuff, so it's good.
Yeah, that's funny. My sister just turned 21, so 2 weeks ago we had Matt Sassari, who I just love him. He's honestly such a good producer, very prolific.
Yeah.
Does a lot of tech house and techno, and actually for a little while Mike Lee, who is the record boss of Funkin' Deep, was handling his bookings in North America and sort of managing him. He has Raw Talent, which is an agency for a lot of really cool techno DJs. And so I had really been on Halcyon that, we should try to get him on something. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it was really cool because she actually got to come and see me play now that she's 21. And she told my mom something really funny, because we had just a really cool, packed, just epic party.
Is that your phone? You might need to turn that off.
Let's see.
It's probably reminding you that we're doing the podcast.
I don't know if that's mine.
Is it mine? No, mine would be telling me. Maybe it is mine.
It's you. I don't have that. I have the obnoxious alarm.
Well, I don't know what it was reminding me of, but anyway, I'm glad I turned that off. Those things are persistent. Anyway, what were you saying?
So yeah, my sister got to actually come and see me play, and it was funny. She told my mom, she's like, "That was the happiest I've ever seen him." So that's funny. What happens to me sometimes is, it does get a little bit tiring doing all these events every weekend. And so I will have times where I'm really sleepy. I'm never in a bad mood, but I'm like tired. But the second I get up on the decks, it's like I just get completely re-energized again. And so, yeah, it's funny. And I think, too, like, my whole aesthetic, people, have different sort of aesthetics when they play. There's some DJs and they're really serious, focused, and it's like, they're never looking at the crowd, especially a lot of the techno DJs. They just really look like they're just completely like in the control panel or something.
Don't be
like
so
that.
emo, techno DJs.
But it's funny. But my whole thing is that like I've always been such a raver. People have called me out for that. First event I went to was when I was 16. It was Tiesto. So it was the day before Thanksgiving, and I actually drove from San Diego to LA. I was being a little bit bad. But yeah, I drove with a car full of people. We went to Tiesto. We're there until like 4 at the Hollywood Palladium. Drive back, get back home kind of before everyone wakes up. We all pass out, in my room, and then it's Thanksgiving the next day. But yeah, I think like I'm definitely throwing out the vibes, and I'm like dancing and smiling and getting crazy and that kind of a thing. Also, the type of techno that I play is a little bit more like groovy, because I like making people dance. I mean, that's not to disparage, because techno is just very wide. There's ambient and there's very deep, and some people who play very dark and heavy, kind of like the Dax J sound where it's like 130 BPM slamming kind of techno, which I like. It's just not really ever been the aesthetic that I've played out.
Yeah. Because
the particular parties that I've had residencies for, just have a little bit more of like, kind of like the tech house into techno sound and that kind of a thing. So, yeah, it's just a bit different. But I think too, the fact that I throw out these vibes and I get crazy, and also people call me out because I do these sort of like I do like the hand flashy
jazz hands
dance and all this stuff, or I do like this kind of a thing. I'm always doing the hands. It's fun.
That's fun. I mean, it's an interesting thing too. Everyone's kind of persona when they hop up on the decks, and everyone's definitely got a different one. I tend to think that the people that are a little bit more animated, it adds something because the person up there that's playing the music is really into it, and I'm the same way. Like when I get up to play, I'm just beaming with excitement because I think when you have all these songs that you're really into, that you're really excited to like show people, to share with people, you can't help but be excited. There's always a little bit of nervousness, I suppose, but the more that you do it, like anything, and the more excited you are about your tracks, you're glowing. You know what I mean? Like.
And the thing is, they're looking at you, so they feed off of that energy,
Yeah.
and that's what's funny.
Right.
Sometimes when I'll do after hours, it's really funny because people do get really drunk, and so I'll have people that will like want to start talking to me. Sometimes because they're requesting a Fisher track or something like that, which I'm not as down with.
What's that meme? Hey, bro, play Fisher.
Yeah, no,
guy in a polo shirt.
That gets funny, but like
Yeah.
I'll let people come up in the booth and dance with me. There was this
Yeah.
one party I was doing where this girl was like, I want a DJ, and so she like took my headphones and she put them on, and I'm not the type of person where I'm like, hey, like I need those, get away. So instead I was just humoring her, so I'm literally just mixing up there with just literally using the monitors. Luckily, when you've been playing out for a while, you get to the point where you don't really need the headphones, because if you just cue right away, you just kind of got it, and you can just do a slight nudge. So I'm like, whatever, I'm just going to challenge myself. So she's just wearing the headphones the whole time while I'm playing. But, I'm very receptive to people, honestly. There's some people that really just don't like that, or it's generally not good karma if there's a DJ playing to get up in the booth. You probably should let them have their space and that kind of a thing. I know, like, with Halcyon, we have the rope that we'll put up here. We have to protect them sometimes. We really do.
Right.
But I don't know. I just get a kick out of it. I think stuff like that's funny.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, being able to roll with the punches, and adds something and adds an element to the show, because in the end of the day, it really is a show. I remember when we had Mark Ribley. You familiar with Mark Ribley?
Yeah.
We had him here, and what a different show that was for Halcyon. I mean, if you're familiar with this stuff, it's a little more like trappy and hip hoppy, and but it didn't really matter. Like he drew. I mean, the place was packed. You know what I mean? And he was definitely like going viral at the time. But it was so wildly different and amazing. Because he's up here wearing a bathrobe. And then about halfway through his set, he drops his bathrobe and he's just in his boxer shorts. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he's just like kind of ripped, but like scrawny, like nerdy looking dude. With the old man glasses. And he's singing about wild shit. And he had had some girls in here that made their way into the booth, and they're dancing on him and like twerking and stuff. And it was just like such a good time.
Yeah, that's really funny. Yeah, he's hysterical. The other thing, too, that I think is funny about this club is that they do some bookings that are pretty ambitious and kind of, I wouldn't say all over the place, but it's definitely a lot of DJs have had their first play here and that kind of a thing, which has been very cool. So,
Right.
Yeah, he's like wild, honestly. Originally, what was funny when they opened this space is that they had all kinds of ideas. Gina, the owner, at one point was thinking that she even wanted to do like a cabaret and have the tables and that kind of a thing. And they also do the sound bath event here.
Yeah,
That's
I just
really
had Nicola on, who does the sound therapy healing. I haven't released the episode yet, but she was, I think, the second to last one, so I'm going to release that tomorrow. But fascinating stuff, and really good conversation. And yeah, I mean, that kind of comes back to the community thing. It's being able to have those things here, and even this podcast, and the after hours and that sort of thing, and all of it kind of adds up. It's cumulative, and being able to be diverse without kind of losing. It's like being a DJ, right? Being diverse but not losing your audience, right? Being able to kind of conform what your set is and being able to play like, oh, maybe I'll play a little bit of this tonight, and a little bit of that. But everybody that knows you is like, all right, well, I'm going to a Dominic M set because I know it's going to be good,
Yeah, I think what's funny, too, for me this year is that when I first started playing, the first party that I did was techno after hours. So I was just all techno all the time. That was just my thing. And this year, I've started to do parties with GCODE, which is sort of an up-and-coming party. They actually started off as a G-House showcase, and my two friends founded it. So it was funny. When I met them, I just told them, I don't dislike G-House, but I just told them very straight up, like, I'm not going to play that type of music. Like, I do techno. That's just what I do. And what was really cool about them is they're like, well, we really like what you play. So we did this after hours where it's actually honestly one of the best sets and most fun sets I've ever done. So it was the first time I ever did it like B2B2B. So it was just us. We were on 3 decks. I'm playing techno. They're mostly playing tech house and actually a little bit of techno too, which they surprised me with. But, we're just doing super fast mixing and people are loving it. And what was funny was that night was when they did the time change where it skipped. What does it do? It skips from 2 to 3 or it goes back.
Yeah.
So we ended up getting to play even longer for whatever reason. So that was really fun because we closed at 7 instead of 6 to, compensate for it.
Right.
So that
We've been playing for an hour. Just kidding. We just got started.
Yeah. So that's really cool. I think the other thing too is that with DJing, as long as you're in phrase and you can go all over the place. I think the really good DJs actually don't stick to one thing. Like Scream, who plays here pretty regularly, is all over the place.
All over the place.
And honestly, like, it's funny because there is this really drunk guy here, and he actually started off as a dubstep producer. So someone literally goes, "Play some dubstep," and I actually just started roaring laughing because I thought, I don't know, it's kind of funny.
That's funny.
But yeah, I take pride in darkening up some of my friends' sound a little bit because a lot of the kind of younger DJs are really into the sort of like Dirty Bird tech house sound. And I get on the decks and I'm, it's not that my sound is super dark, but like I'm very...
It's definitely kind of industrial.
Yeah, so it's like, it's funny though that people resonate with that, and that I think the other thing too is when you hang out with DJs who play differently than you kind of expand each other's horizons.
Yeah.
Right now my roommate is Joey Alanes, who is really, really cool DJ. He's more like disco and groovy and very slow BPMs. So living with him has actually influenced me a lot as well because the stuff that he plays is very different, and we've had some fun nights where we've played together, and I had this really it was funny. I did some kind of a bad roommate thing. I didn't know he was home, so all day I'm in my room and I'm playing like deep house and melodic techno and like kind of trying to discover this sound. And it's like all day, and I thought nobody was home. And then finally he's like, "Hey, can you turn it down?" And I'm like, "Oh, shit. Have you been home all day?" He's like, "Yeah, it's been all day." I'm like, "Oh, damn it." Because he does graphic design, so he works from home sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know. He was like,
funny.
"Well, I really liked what you were playing. It was dope." It's just like, because it was like, I was literally having like a 7-hour
Yeah.
session. But I think what's been funny, too, is, for example, going back to the Matt Sassari party, he's on Funkin' Deep, so we had been talking for a bit, and I asked him how he wanted to be set up, and he actually said he wanted to be set up for tech house, so he could do tech house into techno. So what I did is I started playing techno and then went like kind of, smoothly but sort of suddenly into tech house, and people were really surprised because they generally, especially when they come here, don't hear me play like that, but they were really loving it. So that was a lot of fun, and
Nice.
that night actually was crazy. So there's this funny thing, when you do parties and you're hosting a DJ and, you're having a good time, you always want to make sure they get on the flight. But he did not get on that flight.
Like his booked flight.
Yeah,
shit.
so I can't take too much responsibility for that. So what happened was, we do the party here. It's until 4 a.m. And Mioli, who I also do a lot of events with, booked Drunken Kong, who is this really cool Japanese techno DJ who is also on a ton of great labels as well. So they're friends. They hadn't seen each other for about 2 years. They played a festival together, and that was the last time. So I had messaged him, and I said, "Hey, if you're feeling up for it after your set and you want to go, let's go check it out." So we leave here around 4:30 or so, and Drunken was playing from 4 to 6. We stayed there, for the end of it. And then Halcyon will sometimes do sort of the gay after hours. So that was right after his set, everyone starts pouring in. And as soon as we turn the lights on at after hours, he says, "Oh, let's go back to Halcyon." So that party, because Halcyon, is grandfathered in with the 24-hour license, I think went until 9 a.m.
Wow.
So we're here. And what was really funny, too, is the whole time I'm hanging out with Matt, he's on his phone kind of doing like the speak, where we send the voice messages, and he's speaking in French. Yeah, or no, when you speak, like the voice message.
Oh, yeah.
You send it over
voice dictation.
iOS.
Yeah.
And he's telling his friends, like, he's super excited. One of my friends speak French, and he's like, yeah, like, he's just saying, like, how crazy and fun this is. So we get into the, gay party, and, it's, like, really going off. And, I mean, the whole sound is very, like, poundy, And the first thing he says, he's like, next time we have Metsusari all nights for this party.
Yes.
So he was just loving it. So then we're up, hanging out with Gina and Ria and have this really, really cool time. And then it's 9 a.m, and I'm like, all right, I want to make sure you get on your flight, so let's go. And he's just like, no, like, I don't want to. So we end up going to Monroe, which was really funny. That's the one that is the Sunday Fun Day, 6 a.m. to noon party.
I didn't know they had one of those.
Oh yeah, it's funny. Wow. It's one of the Monroe's actually a very good party, so it's funny
it's
how
a cool
it is.
venue.
It's technically like an after hours, but because they can start serving alcohol again, people go. So yeah, I took him to that, and then we just hung out, and then I was worried. I'm like, oh no, because he had to rebook the flight or whatever. Like, oh no, am I in trouble? But his manager actually added me and was just saying like, oh, he loved it. He had such good things to say. So that was a really fun experience, and it was cool that, he was down to hang out, because he really is, has inspired me so much. Like, I'm always playing a Matt Cesari track in my sets.
Oh yeah.
So to get to have that experience with someone who I opened for was really cool.
Yeah, I think you could damn near like party from Friday afternoon until Monday morning, honestly, because there's like Groove SF at the end up, and that's on Sunday night. You know what I mean? You could literally find probably a party just not, if you could stay up that much.
They also do Word at Monarch, which is a really good one.
Oh yeah.
That's Jimmy B and Wu, Gregory, a lot of really cool DJs that will play there. And what's nice about Word also is that their sound is like all over the place. Like, they'll open with like really jazzy kind of disco-y stuff, and then they'll have techno. So you never know what you're gonna get. But yeah, the thing about San Francisco is that you can realistically do Friday to Sunday nonstop, even until Monday. And I have actually done that once or twice. I have done what I've called the nonstop San Francisco adventure.
I like that.
Yeah, that was good. It was a bit of a marathon, but
you sleep for a week afterwards.
Yeah, you definitely do. But it was worth it. It's just something to put on the bucket list.
Right. That's great. That's something I'm looking forward to being able to do, is kind of travel around and experience different countries kind of music scenes. I mean, there's of course Bristol and the UK and France and just all these spots, Ibiza and parts of Spain, and just I've got to experience it a little bit. So I traveled to I went to Peru probably 8 years ago now, and I actually got to play a set in Peru. So I was dating a girl from Peru, and so we were going back there to visit her family, and her friends were really into electronic music, and that's kind of actually how I met her. And so her friend like literally put on a show at this like big kind of, the place felt kind of like 1015 a little bit, kind of part warehouse but part kind of venue, and it was really sick. And so I got to play out there, and that was an absolute blast. That was funny, traveling at the time. I think obviously I didn't have this whole setup, or even the setup, the controller that I have now that I would travel with. But I had like this little one, it was probably about, it was big enough for a backpack, and I brought that, and I remember I was going through customs when I got into Peru, and they have this like, kind of metal detector thing you walk through, and at the top there's a green light and then a red light, and I'm watching all these Peruvian people walk through, and it's like green light, and of course me, the big tall like 6'2" gringo, walks through, and it's like red light, and I was like, fuck, yeah, I'm not surprised. And so they're like, like, wave me over to the little office, and they're like, all right, well, we have to go through your bag. And I was like, oh, okay, go ahead. So they go through my bag, and, there's my laptop, and then they pull out my DJ controller, and they're like, oh. And I was like, the fuck? And they're like, well, you're going to have to pay travel taxes on these. I was like, why? They're like, well, because this is professional equipment. And I was like, what do you mean professional equipment? In my mind, I'm like, this is just some little backpack-sized controller. Like, this is just a party travel thing, Might as well have been an iPad. And, they're like, well, we have a list of professional equipment, and this is on it. And I'm like, really? Like, I would love to see this list. Yeah, it was pretty funny. But it was the equivalent of like $20 US or something. So I was like, fuck, whatever,
Yeah, that's crazy. I had something happen where I did a party. We had Steve Mulder, I think his label's Orange Recordings or something like that. And he's a tractor DJ, so he has the controller and the laptop and all of that stuff. And he got booked, to come. The party was supposed to be at F8, and he got stopped at customs because they recognized the DJ gear, and because he didn't have the artist visa or whatever, they actually literally turned him back around.
Whoa.
So he couldn't make it to the party. And actually, inadvertently, that was how I ended up getting to play. I had to actually step in. So, yeah, it was... we still, the show has to go on and that kind of a thing. But, yeah, that was crazy to have that happen. So, yeah.
I didn't realize you needed an artist visa.
Oh, yeah. He must have said the wrong thing at the gate or whatever when they stopped him. He could have just said, oh, yeah, it's just for my hobby or whatever. But,
right.
Yeah, I think... Oh, you know what they did? They looked at his phone, or they looked up his name, and they saw that he was on an event.
Oh.
So that was how they busted him. That was what he told us, actually, because he DJs with his real name. So they knew, oh, you're actually here in San Francisco to play this gig.
Those Googling bastards.
Yeah, that's crazy that they did that.
Right.
That's kind of messed up,
honestly. It seems so nonsensical.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's why it's good that some of these DJs have, especially for techno, have these aliases, and they're like Astronaut Ghost.
Right, yeah.
Crazy, European and the umlauts. That's how you protect
DJ
yourself.
Face Melter, yes.
Yeah,
right.
I went by Dominic M, honestly, because I just like being myself, and people know me as Dominic, and I could have had some cool name, but I think my name is cool. I'm named after my grandpa.
Totally.
M is a nice hard consonant. It's
just
something. There's terminal.
It is a good one.
It's a decent.
It's like an M Sport BMW, M just M Machine. You know what I mean? It works.
And what's good is there's not another Dominic M, so that's nice.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot that goes into kind of what you go by as a DJ. You know what I mean? I kind of always wanted to have something that would be lasting. I didn't want to do the DJ face melter or whatever, because it was like, I don't want to be changing. I cringe a little bit when I see the people that change their name as an artist every, 3-4 years or whatever. And it's like, man, it's really, purely from a SEO, search engine optimization aspect, that makes it a little bit difficult, right? Because you did a show 8 years ago. You want that to kind of pop up still so people can see some sort of, lineage. And so that's why I really try to choose what I'm going to make music under or play under and stick with it. Even if I do have multiple aliases, let's stick with it and not flip flop.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty important too. At one point, it's funny because on Facebook my name is Dominic Philosophic because I was a philosophy major in college, and I have slight social media paranoia where, particularly because I'm a teacher, I don't have anything on there that is bad, but generally you don't want your students to find you and that kind of a thing, because then they try to add you and stuff that's just not ideal. Right. So even in college, actually, you know what it was too, when you apply for colleges, they tend to look at your social media. So I just had this idea early on that I just didn't want to be on Facebook as my real name. And so, that was how the whole Dominic Philosophic thing on Facebook started. Now they're really on it, where if you do a name that they don't think is legit, they want you to send them your ID, but because I made it so long ago. So I actually, at one point, was thinking about going by Dominic Philosophic, but it's too long to go on a flyer, and then I realized that, I actually really did want to go, at least by the...
That's much more difficult to spell. Yeah. I tend to take that stance on social media as well. I don't censor myself, but I also don't say anything that I wouldn't. Actually, I say less on social media than I would in person, right? Because when you say there's something to social media that kind of you're tempted to get in these like Twitter and Facebook feuds and stuff, but I tend to just not even say anything. I'd say less than I would say in person because so much of it lacks context. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like there's just, I don't know. I just I like to post funny memes and keep things light. And I've been really into TikTok lately.
Yeah, TikTok is funny.
I fucking love TikTok, dude. Like it's a time warp. I'll get on there and like an hour goes by. I'm like, what the fuck? But someone, Gary V. Are you familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk?
No, who's that?
He's like a business guy, entrepreneur. He talks a lot at he does a lot of social media content on how to grow your businesses and that sort of thing. But really, really smart dude. And he pointed out that the reason why TikTok is so big right now, billions of users, is because it's everything online is so there's a lot of kind of toxicity and vitriol and that sort of thing, and TikTok is just very light, very funny and very whimsical, and it's kind of refreshing. And I think a lot of the younger generations are kind of sensing like now people Facebook has kind of become like that's what their parents are on, which is weird.
Yeah, the other thing too that I'm kind of wary about is if you make these really bold political statements and that kind of thing on Facebook, you do actually tend to alienate, at least some people. And I think, especially as someone who's an entertainer or you're DJing, you don't necessarily want to do that because you actually can turn people off. And that being said, every once in a while I might say something that's a little spunky and sassy or stick up for someone or something like that.
Yeah.
If I feel like I really, really need to, but that's not generally what I'm trying to put out there.
Right.
And, the other thing is, and some people really don't like this, but, social media is so important these days. That was another talk I had with Matt Sassari too. He's really good at social media. He does it all himself. He doesn't have a social media manager. Will Clark is another one who is really cool. So what he'll do is, you go to his show and you're tagging him in your story and that kind of a thing, and he'll message every single person at the end of the night and say like, thank you for coming to the show, and if you reply back, he'll talk to you, and it's really him. It's very funny. So, people who do that, it actually really means a lot because ultimately, especially for those guys who are on a big platform and they're out there and they're charting, they have real fans who come out and they just love them. So engaging with their audience the way that they do is very, very cool. Absolutely.
I noticed that about Will Clark. He lots of funny, kind of silly videos, doesn't take himself too seriously. So something I've been really loving is Claude Von Stroke will post. He does this top down of like a Technic 1200 turntable, and it's playing one of his vinyls, and just two lights come. It's very kind of moody and dimly lit. And there's one of his songs playing, and in the caption or whatever he'll put kind of a little story, a little backstory about how he made the song or whatever, and that's the stuff that I love. That's actually why I started doing this podcast, not because of those posts, but because I started listening whenever he started doing the Birdhouse radio show. And kind of there would be these little segues where they would talk, kind of radio announcer style in between the songs. And, he would throw in these little, he'd be talking to another DJ or producer or his producer or host. And, he'd give a little story about this song that's coming up and what went into it and what it was made with. And I found myself like hanging on these little quips in between the songs. And I was like, fuck, I want more of that, Oh, yeah. That's where this started, just being able to get the long form of that, There's no music. I actually did a podcast before this with a buddy where we would play music and then talk kind of similar in between, but, there's enough places to get DJ mixes, and there's endless DJ mixes,
Yeah, I mean, having a little bit of personality on social media is also a good thing.
For sure.
One of my things I do, some people might take it the wrong way, but my little tagline is I say Dark Prince of Techno. But it's like, why do I do that? It's like, well, my mom, when I was little, we would watch the Disney movies. I had, my mom was like kind of a cool young mom. She had me when she was like 22 or 23, and we would watch all the Disney movies, and she would call me like Prince Eric or stuff like that. All the Disney princes. And then also it's funny. I'm Persian, and like when you're Middle Eastern, people always joke about like royalty. It's
Oh
really
yeah.
like a joke. It's not like I'm not being pretentious or that kind of a thing.
Right.
Other thing too with San Francisco is like you can call yourself whatever you want. You can
Right.
be the Duchess of Deep House or whatever.
Yeah.
It's all like just kind of a sassy joke.
Right.
But what I think is funny is like now people will call me that when they see me. And I'm like, yeah, that's really, I love it. I don't know. It's funny.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, like, what was interesting too is, kind of going back to why I really like underground music. Like in high school, I was not like someone who I would consider to be like a social outcast or like one of the goth kids, but I would hang out with those kids. Some of my best friends who I still talk to were like, kind of those types of people. I just would hang out with everybody. That's the whole thing. Like I was not cliquey or that kind of a thing. But like a lot of the music that I was listening to back then was, like Crystal Castles or like Royksop is very, very cool, or Ladytron, who actually just played in Berkeley. I totally missed that show. I should have gone. So some of those sounds really influenced me, from an early stage. Kind of like what I would have called sort of like the hipster music.
Totally.
I love all that stuff.
Totally. Yeah, in high school, I was listening to, I was a little bit more into like the kind of 90s like trance music, which is weird. I like trance now, but it's different than it was. I was listening to Castles in the Sky and, kind of Ibiza type trance stuff,
Oh, yeah.
There was a ooh la 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 all around the world.
Yeah, I
ooh
love
la
that
la.
stuff.
Yeah, I've just found a acapella of that I think I'm gonna turn into a remix. 'Cause I particularly like that one track.
Yeah, I mean, that was actually a lot of the stuff that I was listening to as well. Like ATB, I went and saw maybe like 6 years ago. But yeah, it has that one like a ritual, disgrace, Marrakesh adventure, all that stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, the sound was very different.
very different.
Actually, for me, it's kind of interesting. So, like for example, EDC was all ages.
Mm.
So with the last time I ever went to EDC, it was in 2009, and it was the last one they did in LA. It was at USC at whatever the like football, whatever bowl is.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's crazy to think that it was all ages. That's why they got in some deep, deep trouble. Actually, the kind of sad, dark thing is that there was a 14-year-old girl who OD'd on, bad pills. So that was why LA was just not having it with them anymore.
Yeah.
Obviously, Vegas was very eager to swoop them up, but then it became, I think at this point, I don't know if it's 21 up or 18 up, but obviously not an all ages event.
Mm.
And I think the city council ended up banning all the rave events. So even, hard events, which used to do events there, is now like at the Speedway. They're kind of like on the outskirts. They're not in LA County anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny, like all those events were all ages, which is crazy to think about. It was definitely a lot of the candy ravers. And what was also interesting too was that the main stage was trance. It was all trance. It wasn't EDM.
Wow.
So it was like Ferry Corsten and Tiesto and Above and Beyond.
Right.
Who actually I got kind of a funny story with them. So I used to listen to Trance Around the World in high school. Love that show. Prefer it really strongly to the Group Therapy, which is a little bit more progressive. And they did Trance Around the World 350 in LA at the Palladium. And I really wanted to go. It was like I had to go to this event. I had a friend who, I was still in high school at the time. He was at UCLA, was a freshman. And I told him like, oh, get a ticket, but they sold out really quickly. So I literally went alone. It's kind of funny that I did that, but I had to go. And I remember at one point, like I was, I'm being pretty responsible. Like I'm pretty young at the time. And I'm just like hanging out alone, and some people are like, "Oh, did you lose your friends?" And I was so shy because I didn't want to be like, "Oh, I literally just came here alone." I mean, now obviously I am more secure, and I'd have no problem just being like, "Oh, I just came to this event alone," like whatever. Right. But yeah, that was funny. I had to be there, and they had Cosmic Gate, they had Super 8 and Tab, who also played here. Boom Jinx, who is kind of more like on the Injuna Deep, who was really cool. And yeah, that was epic, and also Cosmic Gate was very, very cool.
Right. It's so cool how many like scenes there are. I mean, there's just so many different scenes for so many. There's what got to be thousands of subgenres under electronic music. There's a website that I went to a while back that's got like, it's almost like a thought bubble or like a brainstorm, but it's like electronic music, and then everything that spawns out of that is like, techno, house, and that's what. And then from out of that is like progressive house, deep house, future house, tech house, and it's just, and there's a scene for every one of those, whether you're into hard style or industrial techno or like DNA Lounge. I went to a gothic industrial techno night, fairly recently, and it was like, man, it's just like you're talking about, like these, people wearing the giant boots with the buckles and all black and like the kind of emo like hair and the spikes and shit, and they're listening to electronic music. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Actually, what's funny about DNA Lounge is they do have that goth night that's on Mondays.
Yeah.
And the dancing that's happening there is like, I've never seen anything like it. I think it's super cool.
Yeah.
They booked, he's Daniel Meyer. He has a few aliases, architect. So he was booked to play there. So I went for that and went to a few of the other ones. And yeah, it's very, very cool. I mean, there's a lot of people that obviously, like, that's their scene, that's their party, that's where they feel really comfortable. But I think that's what's special about San Francisco is that we do have a lot going on, and there pretty much is something for everybody. But, another thing, too, that people complain about is because there are so many labels now for music, there is a tendency sometimes for things to be slightly miscategorized. One of the things people always talk about is like tech house mislabeled as techno and that kind of a thing. And you sometimes think maybe there's a reason why, because technically when you put something out, you just slap whatever genre you want, right? There's not like a screening process for it.
Right.
So you just, you put the track out and you just say like, okay, this is what it is, and it's funny how it is. But a lot of the things kind of blend the lines. A lot of the times, why they call it a techno track, it's just because, the way that the kick sounds, but then they have some of these other elements, like the, kind of claps are a lot more techy and that kind of a thing.
It gets blurry.
Yeah, so it does get blurry, which I think is cool,
I love it. I mean, a lot of my own productions, like I call my Friends of Benefit stuff, I call it future bass, but that's just out of sheer lack for knowing exactly what to call it. You know what I mean? It's in that realm, I suppose, but it's, and this is something I like about it is, and I take pride in, is that it is kind of not all over the place. I give myself very few rules when I make that, because I want it to be whatever it's going to be. With my like house music or like techno-y stuff, like I know exactly like what kind of focused direction I want it to go, but this other stuff is just whatever it's going to be. And it's funny, people will listen to it and they'll kind of call it whatever genre they think it is. You know what I mean? I'm like, thank you, because I didn't know what to call it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the whole like need to label sound is kind of interesting. I mean, you really like, again, I encourage myself now this year to really go all over the place, and I think the really effective DJs too, like, take people on a journey. Actually, going back now, I'm thinking about Will Clark again. What's funny about him is he really blew up because of Dirty Bird, but actually the sound he really likes is techno. And so what's cool about when he plays here is that he actually can, and a lot of DJs say this about Halcyon, which is, again, why I really like it here, is that they can really play what they want, especially because of how San Francisco is. Our crowd is very receptive to that. So when he plays here, he plays just like slamming techno the whole time. It does not sound like a Dirty Bird set at all,
right,
compared to what his set might sound like at Camp Out or something like that.
I think it's smart, though, because, a lot of, Dirty Bird's really interesting because they, for sure, sculpted a genre. I mean, really. I mean, it's tech house, but it's almost a genre of its own, right? With people trying to make stuff that has that same kind of sound, and to the point where I guess which is amazing, because that is, I mean, talk about establishing your sound in an industry, right? With so many different subgenres, but I guess the flip side of that is a lot of people, if you aren't an official Dirty Bird DJ or producer and you're playing stuff like that, it's almost like people are like, oh, he's trying to be Dirty Bird. You know what I mean? It's this weird kind of thing. So I feel like it's almost kind of smart of Will Clark to play kind of more techno-y stuff. And then when he wants to, I mean, he's kind of, grandfathered in with that that sound, and shows he's very flexible too.
Oh, yeah.
Being able to make both things and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, Dirty Bird in particular in San Francisco is a huge label. I think what they did that's very smart is that they really built up the community. So, for example, with Camp Out, I've actually never been, but what they do is that they have the DJs hanging out with everyone, and you have like teams, and you do actual, like, if you're at a summer camp.
Yeah.
So they
potato
do, like,
sack races.
So yeah, they do those
Yeah.
kinds of things, and
Yeah.
you're like actually hanging out with the DJs,
Right.
and so those kinds of experiences for people are really special, and that's why, especially the clubs, you'll see people and they're like strapped with like the egg patch, and it's like they have all the stuff from Camp Out.
Yeah.
Desert Hearts also does something very similar. So Desert Hearts does have a label, definitely not as on the map or as prolific as Dirty Bird is, but what they did, I think, actually was very organic. I actually really like those guys. They're super fun, especially Lee Reynolds is hysterical. So when he comes to San Francisco, like, he's out. He's always at Afterhours. We did one. There's this really cool guy. I'm not going to name names because with the whole Afterhours, we have to be a little hush-hush. But what he does is he's a prop designer. So he designs props. For example, if Instagram is having an event and, they want, like, their logo, or, he does, like, he makes the Game of Thrones throne and stuff that's, like, the foam props. So what was cool was he was doing it at his warehouse, and so he had all these sick props, and we would sometimes do Mioli there. So I remember Lee Reynolds came. It was right before we were going to go to the actual Desert Hearts event, and I see him there, and I'm like shocked. I'm like, oh my God, it's you, And yeah, he's really, really nice. Again, like, that's like what's very cool about San Francisco is that when DJs come here, they're very interested in actually going out and seeing what it's like. And because we really do have, kind of a nonstop party, there's always something for them to do after the night's over and when they're done playing.
Yeah. Well, that's why so many people, so many DJs love and producers love Burning Man, because, it's got a very San Francisco vibe and it's very accepting, and a lot of DJs kind of just play whatever it is they want to play. You know what I mean? Like that, you're doing that, you're not getting paid, and no one's getting paid for their set. So it's like, you're going to see whatever that artist really wants to play, which is, leads to some really, really special sets, like, Justin Martin playing drum and bass. Like he really kind of, I think, I imagine he shies away from playing that at clubs because that's not what he's kind of known for. But that's where both, the Christian brothers got their, or the Martin brothers got their start. Early days was drum and bass and that sort of thing, And I love that. Yeah,
that's definitely very special. I think, too, it's funny because the Burning Man community is huge in San Francisco. A lot of the major sound camps are based out here, particularly because they're able to leverage some of this tech money to get funding, which, I don't have any issues with. There is kind of this notion with Burning Man that some of these tech bros or whatever are like ruining the vibe, and I don't know that I have much to say about that. I mean, I just can't really comment either way.
Yeah.
Ultimately, in order to do what they do, they need to have good money. These productions that some of these camps are doing are, well into hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Sometimes more,
and
yeah.
So, a lot of the bigger camps are funded with tech money and that kind of a thing.
Right.
But, that's just kind of the nature of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of to people that are complaining, I guess that's the unfortunate truth to them, is that, the tech money is, why a lot of these people can have these, warehouses, which, are not cheap to have in a place like San Francisco, and, take on these projects, building an art car, which takes an extraordinary amount of time and dedication and a team of people, you know what I mean? And then the sheer storage space if you're going to build a giant metal dancing lady or whatever,
Oh, yeah.
Or the stages. The stages are insane, too.
Yeah, I have another friend. He was working at Amazon for at least 12 or 13 years, got very senior level up there, and then recently got divorced, and then also just kind of decided that he wanted to take a break. So what he's done is he's made this massive investment. He's got all these Function Ones now in Berkeley, and, is essentially really wanting to do this, like have events. And he's such a nice guy, really like wants to do it, just to have events and just, like, so that's what happens to a lot of these people. They get jaded from working in the tech scene, and he just is like really down to like spend money and make this happen. So
Right.
it's been very cool. So yeah, there's a few events that I will want to work with him on as far as having the sound and bringing it into spaces like End Up. I've actually been in talks with about doing some day parties there, so we could bring in the function ones and really like deck it out because they have a really nice patio out there. So
Oh yeah.
that's something I've got cooking up for next year.
Fuck yeah. That's for sure going to be me. I'm going to be that dude with a warehouse, and I don't know if I'd want to either maybe like put on a stage or have an art car or what, but I definitely need to have some sort of presence. And I went to Burning Man for the first time this last year and just so insanely hooked. I have always kind of felt like a burner. I just never actually went because they make all these weird things, and very a producer and very much into electronic and that sort of thing. I heard that Carl Cox actually is a big part of the Playground stage. Whether he funds it or what, I'm not sure, but it's one of the bigger stages there, and it's just insane. His techno set there was like fucking mind blowing.
Yeah, I think it might actually be his camp.
I think it is his camp.
Because I know that they did a fundraiser at Midway where it was him and Joseph Capriati. Also, someone who's part of it is Brendan Gray, who I got to open for here as well. He is part of the Insomniac events, I think, marketing team, and he's been really instrumental in their Factory 93 production. So I remember I was chatting him up a little bit. He also opened for Nina Kravitz, I believe, so that was nice. He remembered me and we talked a little bit. But he actually shot the promo video for Factory 93 when they brought it to EDC for the first time. They went out in the desert and they had like kind of a trippy kind of Burning Man style video with this girl who's all decked out, and I think it's very cool. So yeah, he's part of it, Brennan, and then Sid Griss also was, I think, part of the lineup as well, who does Opulent Temple.
Oh yeah.
So there's definitely some San Francisco money going into it.
Are you trying to make it out to Burning Man, or have you been? Because I feel like you would fit in really well.
Well, the issue is that because I teach, I've never been able to get the time off, but luckily next year I'll be able to, or I guess this year, technically upcoming, I'll be able to do it because finally I have a job where I'll be able to actually get time off. But what has been, kind of like the thing for me is that now school's not really starting after Labor Day, so it's literally that first week. But yeah, I'm going to do it. And what's been nice is that I have had some camps that have told me that if I go out I can play, so I would actually get to really have a good time out there. So
for sure. Yeah, it's just insane. If you're into electronic music, there's all kinds of music out there, but it definitely has a electronic music bias for sure. And I just, I was turned on to so many different new sounds. I don't know what rock I was living under, but found out about Gorgon City. Saw them play twice at one of the stages there, and just had my mind blown. And it's just a total breeding ground for electronic stuff.
Oh yeah, I think the other thing too is a lot of people come back and they're just very changed from the experience. One of my roommates is funny. Someone who also got divorced, and so he's kind of like going through it a little bit. So he went, and then he comes back and he has like this beard. He like totally grew out his beard, which was sick. Actually, he looked cool. I saw him. I moved into a new spot, so I hadn't seen him for a few months. And then I see him, and I'm like, oh damn! Like they really did a number on you out there.
Turned into a Viking.
Yeah. The other thing too is, especially with a lot of the older San Francisco DJs, they definitely have some of these like brotherhood bonds or whatever that they've formed out, just from being out on the playa. I can only imagine, just because just how rough it is out there, that they, you really come back, kind of having those stronger connections.
Right.
Yeah, I've always wanted to go. I've always felt a little bit left out, actually, because a lot of the people who are doing parties out here, it's a lot of their burner friends. And so it's like, well, I haven't gone, so I can't actually, like connect with them in that way. But hopefully the game will change this year.
Yeah. It's difficult for me to take time off too, because every weekend is That's where I make my money. Recently started a Patreon, and I'm started to kind of announce that at the end, and I'm going to hope to do them at the beginning of the podcast as well. But get some donations coming in, so I can occasionally take the time off to, go to some of these festivals and Burning Man every year for sure, and because it does, Burning Man especially takes a considerable amount of time just working up to it. I mean, people spend all year getting ready for it, and then even if you're not putting on a camp or a stage or whatever, it's like it could take you 2 or 3 weeks, minimum to get your shit together and get all set up.
What I think is crazy is that there's some people that like somehow they just get a last minute ticket and they pack up and go in a week. But I imagine that they have some friends that are supporting them a bit, because you really how can you get ready and go on an impulse in a week? It's just insane.
It's not the place you want to go just with a little single person tent. You know what I mean? Like, it can be very gnarly. And even with a camp, I went with Iceberg Cowboys, which is amazing first experience and fantastic people. I felt a little bit spoiled because it's just there's such infrastructure that they provide, with the food and the water, and we even had our own private porta potty and stuff. And I just can't even. And it's rough. Even it can be difficult even with all of that.
Yeah.
And so just trying to, some places like Lightning in a Bottle or Symbiosis, if they keep doing festivals or any of these other festivals, you can kind of just show up with a tent and a bag and your car and thrive. But you're able to pay for showers and you're able to buy food and that sort of thing.
One of the really good ones that's sort of a Bay Area one that's sort of a small boutique one is Sunset Campout that they do up in Belden Town.
Right.
So what's interesting about there is that they do a few events, but they have like a general store. You can go and you can get ice and you can get like everything you need.
Yep.
We had a generator that we needed like fuel for, and so you can basically get everything that you need that you forgot out there.
Yeah.
And not even for that ridiculous of a price. And they also have like a bar and that kind of a thing. That one is cool. I, for whatever reason, had kind of like a grumpy festival time out there because it was very hot. So I'm just used to how cold it is here. So I got really dehydrated, and it was like, where I was drinking water, but I kind of was realizing like I probably should have gotten some electrolytes. So I just could not get hydrated. So the whole time I was like dehydration sick, and so I was being kind of, I was being a little bit grumpy, which is never the good vibe for a festival. But that kind of goes back to like you have to take care of yourself and you have to be prepared.
Yeah.
Because that kind of a thing can really ruin the experience. Like if you're sick, obviously, like you can't have a good time. But what's cool about Sunset is, it's like Jalen and Solar and some of these guys have been doing parties for a really long time. They'll play at Hospitality, and, a lot of them play vinyl, but it's a lot of local SF DJs. And I think generally it's more disco, which is definitely not the sound that I typically go out to listen to, but that one's pretty fun.
Sometimes just the vibe of a party will get you there, regardless. I'm pretty agnostic as far as music when I go out, just because again, like it all comes down to the vibe. Like, is the vibe good? You know what I mean? Which is why I've gone to gothic industrial techno nights, because it just presented itself, and I'm like, yeah, fuck it, let's test it out.
Yeah, the community, of a party and sort of who goes there and who the regulars are really make or break it.
Right.
That was sort of the thing for me, is that as someone who started out doing after hours, when I first moved here, it was very different. You would get text messages, and there would be spots like all over the place. Like there was one in Japantown that very famously got raided, so that was kind of not a good end to the night. But they straight up came in with flashlights, and I was just like, I don't need to stick around, we're leaving, so we just dipped. But they've kind of cracked down on it a little bit more in San Francisco. They're very, very liberal here in general, but they've started to really enforce it a little bit more, particularly because, well, they're private parties, right? So the thing is, it's kind of a dodgy thing, because technically if you're selling alcohol after hours, that's not exactly kosher, right? But it's also like, if I'm having a private party and I invite you over and it's 4 a.m., we can drink wine. So they tend to navigate that a little bit.
Yeah.
But LA has a scene like that, and so do we. It really goes back to like this stupid politics of why do we have the 2 a.m. last call?
Right.
Allegedly because it prevents drunk driving, but I looked into it pretty clearly. And the thing is, like, if people are going to be stupid and they're going to drink and drive, it's not an issue of like, okay, if we're going to extend it another 2 hours, it doesn't actually do anything. Like, they're going to be idiots anyway.
Right.
So unfortunately, it's not actually a deterrent. So really all it does is it hurts the venues, particularly out here in San Francisco, where these venues are paying a lot of rent. You know, contrary to what a lot of people think, most of the venues in San Francisco are operating in the red.
Yeah.
They absolutely are. I mean, I will tell you, I have the inside scoop. I work very closely with a lot of these venues. I know exactly what their margins are like. Mezzanine literally went bankrupt.
Right.
They couldn't afford to pay the rent when, you know, their rent got increased, you know, triple-fold or whatever
Well,
it
I mean,
is.
who could,
You know, some other venues that I don't want to talk about because that's kind of their private thing, but,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of them that have been in the red or they've been fundraising and that kind of a thing for a long, long time. So, you know, that would actually really save a lot of these venues, as being able to have another 2 hours of bar sales also is much better for the industry people. You know, you and I, for example, were just talking earlier about how, you know, we were 15 and we got our work permits and we started working in restaurants and that kind of a thing. And,
Yeah.
you know, especially with San Francisco, like, that would really help. You know, the tips and, you know, the extra money from another 2 hours of bar sales would help a lot of our friends be able to pay these ridiculous rents and
Right.
make it in the city. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, kind of going back to what I was talking about, I'm a little all over the place. You know, after hours, what I do like about it is that people who are there are really music lovers. You would think that, okay, like, yeah, they're, you know, they just want to go out and it's sloppy. It's not actually like that at all. I'm very sensitive, particularly if I'm playing at a spot. You know, I'm looking out in the crowd. I want to make sure that my friends are safe and everyone's having a good time. I'm the type of person where if I saw something that was not right and I'm playing, I would literally get off the decks and, like, do what I need to do or get security to handle it. But I have never, ever, in the 3.5 years that I've been doing that, had to intervene in a situation or see something that I thought was not right. Like, generally, people are pretty on point, you know, which, it's funny, it's kind of a filter because they're private invite-only events.
Right.
It's not like anyone can go, and they actually do, in fact, screen at the door. So, you know, for me in particular, Halcyon was the first club that put me on. So the first show I did was they booked my favorite DJ, Jillian Jewell, who is now on Drum Code.
Yeah.
I opened that one with Sean Rea, who's been on your podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And so he and I also used to do the same after hours together. So what happened was, you know, because people for after hours generally are not, like, they don't buy pre-sales, the ticket sales were a little bit slow, I remember. And I was like, don't worry, it's going to be good. Just trust me, they're going to come. And I remember it's 10:40, and it's like before the, you know, they do sometimes like the discount before 11 tickets and that kind of a thing. And it was packed in here. It was packed. Like, I was just so happy to see that that's how the night was going to go. And yeah, we had a really great time. But a lot of those people that I connected with early on are the ones who have supported me quite a bit. Because the thing is, you're actually, like, out in these small spaces with them. That's where you can actually really talk to people and hang out. The whole point of why there is an after-hours scene is that, you know, industry people want to go out too. It's like, okay,
Right.
when we're done working and it's, you know, 2 or 4 a.m., we also want to go and hang out with our friends. And it's like, well, where do we go do that? Because now all the clubs are closed. So that was how they started in a lot of these cities, is there were these industry parties. But now it's obviously expanded where, you know, a lot of the clubbers also want to go and stay out. And so that's been very cool. And I think the way that I've been able to network with a lot of industry people here in San Francisco is actually through that.
They're fantastic for networking because those are the
yeah.
people that are just like you said, the industry people, the DJs that, you know, want to keep playing and have a good time. And, you know, I see it as kind of like the war on drugs. Like, the government's not stopping people from doing drugs, clearly. You know what I mean? Like, it's a failed experiment. And same thing with, like, the 2 o'clock, stopping of liquor sales. Like, you're not going to stop people from having fun, right?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
you know, even the fact that, you know, I mean, I know there's noise ordinances and stuff like that, but, you know, after hours exists for a reason. They're thriving because people still want to, you know, have a good time. And I almost think it's kind of, you know, it's people have to leave where they're at and go to another place. And that, if you're really concerned about people drinking and driving, which, with Uber and Lyft these days, I don't see it as much of a problem anymore. I think that, especially in San Francisco, I can say I know pretty much everybody that I know, is going to take a Lyft or an Uber. But, it's just, you have to go from one place to the next. And, for a place like a venue or a bar, we open at 10 and, people generally don't show up until 11. So then you have 11 to 2 a.m. to make your sales 2 nights a week, to pay rent and that sort of thing. And I thought that I had read that the bill had been passed to extend liquor sales till 4 a.m. But then I haven't heard anything about it recently. So I don't know.
Yeah, well, what happened was, I guess, who was the previous governor? Because now we have Gavin Newsom, but
Wasn't Willie Brown, was it?
Yeah, it was Jerry Brown.
Brown, yeah.
He actually founded one of the charter schools that I worked for. I'm going to be honest, not a huge fan of his for a myriad of reasons, but we don't need to get into that.
Yeah.
But he had vetoed it. So now they were thinking, okay, well, Gavin's cool. So I think now there's a big push for it. So I'm really hoping that's going to happen. I mean, I think for me, I would, even as someone who has done after hours for a while, would really like to see the venues succeed and be able to have, their parties that go later, not have to shut down at 2 and have these kind of later night parties. Also because I just like the extended sets. I mean, that's what I really like. In San Diego, for example, I remember I went to this, it was when I was really young. It was one of the clubs that was 18 up or whatever. You get the wristband if you were 21. And I went to see Benny Benassi, and it was their format is the headliner goes on at 1 and plays an hour set. That sucks. That's not good at all. Luckily here, Gina in particular has a way of getting them to really play for a long time.
She's very, she is good at that, and an hour is just, I mean, if you're a DJ, you're just getting warmed up.
Oh yeah, I don't even like to play for an hour. It sucks. Honestly, it's I feel like I barely, especially if sometimes I actually really like to do back-to-backs recently. I just think it's a lot more fun because, you're really having to mesh with people and you kind of have to think on your feet a little bit.
Yep.
So it's you get to play 6 or 7 tracks and then it's already over. That's not fun at all.
Right.
So yeah, I prefer to do a 2-hour set. What's been nice with Halcyon is that for a lot of the parties I've been able to be the only direct support, so I've gotten to play 10 to 12:30 when I opened for Enrico Sangiuliano.
Yeah.
So that was really nice. But actually the best experience I've had this year was with Julian Jewell. So he came back for the second time. I did it was Shane Fontaine and I. So Shane Fontaine is super cool. I really wanted to play with him. We had never played together before. We've done events and we've been on the same lineup. So I had a boat party that I did. I got off the boat, got here at about 10:40. I played alone for 30 minutes, and then we played together for about an hour and a half or so. And then what's funny is every time I've seen Julian Jewell in a lineup, he has always closed. It's no one wants to close after this guy because he just plays really hard. I've always said that, nobody wants to close after this guy. But it was about 3 a.m. and he had been playing for about 2.5 hours, 3 hours or so. So I was asked to close. So I literally did have to close after him. And what was really special about that, because we pulled so many people from our boat party to come here, is nobody left. So I literally got to have the experience of playing here at this club with, the packed dance floor and then the lights going on at 4 a.m. and everyone clapping. And that was a major boost for my confidence, just to know that I could actually keep people in after the headliner and that, they're screaming and cheering and that kind of a thing.
Oh, yeah.
I'd never experienced anything like that.
There's a special art to being able to keep that energy going, right? Because it's a different thing than opening.
Yeah, I did a party last night at Public Works, and I got a really nice comment. Someone messaged me, and they said, "Oh, my friend kept wanting, because we closed also, my friend kept wanting to leave, and he probably canceled his Uber 5 times, because every time he wanted to go, he would play another track and just keep them back in."
That's amazing.
So that's really cool. And I think with that, it's really just, you have to really keep the energy up, and just keep emboldening people and make them forget that they're tired.
Right.
You have to re-energize them.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, the closer last night was really good. It really kept the energy going, and you mentioned your boat party. That's an interesting thing I've been seeing. They're kind of gaining in popularity lately, both here and down in L.A. One of my friends moved to L.A. and she's always sending these Snapchats of people doing these boat parties. And that's
Oh
kind of
yeah.
this weird. It's like this weird blend of things. It's like you have a kind of definitely smaller system, right? Because you can't exactly lug these function ones onto a boat. I mean, I guess you could, but
We
um,
actually we so there's Bay Area Sound Systems. Atlas has been doing a lot of sounds. I'm actually trying to plug him for a lot of things because he's a really cool guy. He actually did the sound when Halcyon did the Christian Martin boat party.
oh yeah,
But yeah, his thing that I joke with him, I'm like, oh, I always assumed that you were like Mary Poppins and you just opened a bag and you just the function ones just pop out. But no, I mean they're like lugging him around.
like one of those tents you just open up.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
it was like you put a water droplet and it just expands or something
Like
like
one of those little
that.
dinosaurs, yeah.
But yeah, we actually were able to bring function ones for one of the decks. So there's Jill McDonald. She does deep house yoga. She also works for Hornblower Cruises.
Mm.
So they have one of their really nice yachts is the Spirit of San Francisco. It's a 3 deck. There's 2 in-store decks on the top level deck. So we did with GCODE, Base on the Bay. We had Mado as the headliner. He's actually coming back here to Halcyon February 1st. We're doing a party with him. It's Limbo, which is more like underground kind of sound.
Mm.
So that'll be me and Fat Jordan, and then Baker, who's one of the GCODE founders, and him. But yeah, we had a really good party. I mean, I honestly, I will say it probably was like the boat party of the season. And, to be honest, we definitely took a bit of a loss on it because the cost of doing a boat party is substantial. I don't think people
Oh.
get, just renting the boat for the cruise is a ton of money. And then, they spared no expense as far as the sound and all that.
Mm.
And then, also the other thing I really like about GCODE is that they're really into the vibes. So they do a lot of decor.
Oh yeah.
We have Anthony, who is kind of like our vibe curator, and he's like buying plants and like building stuff with his hands and sewing and all these. He actually did one here with you.
Yeah,
You
I
got-
spent a
you-
lot of time with him.
You got to work with him, yeah.
Great guy.
So those kinds of things actually really. It seems a little extra, and we did one party. I'm not going to say where, but they kind of said, "Oh, it seems like that's really unnecessary," and we're just like, "No, it is necessary. You don't understand. Like this is why people come back.
Yeah.
Because when they see that, like right now,
The
look
vibe
at-
was real.
Oh yeah, I mean, and Halcyon also, that always have the different decor. Right now, it's very festive. A lot of the stuff actually has been taken down. We have the Christmas trees and the inflatable snowmen and all the stuff back here recently. It was really cool. But yeah, that adds a lot to the aesthetic.
Right. Well, I mean, there's people come out to venues so often, I mean, to see it kind of transformed. I remember many years ago I went to Harlot. Harlot's a great little spot, kind of in the cuts of the Soma Fidei area, and they had done, it was like this jungle theme where they had these inflatable animals and we've done this here too, but like vines hanging from the ceiling, and it just really adds to the vibe. It's like it's something different, and it's fun, and it kind of a theme like that really. I mean, everybody loves a themed party, whether it's a 80s themed party or whatever, even something kind of random bag like Halloween where everyone's dressed up differently and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. With Techno, the theme is just always black, which is a good theme.
Right.
It's funny, but yeah, I mean, I think having those kinds of things really kind of create the lasting memories and that kind of a thing.
Mm.
Also goes back to why are some of these party brands that tour, I always use Desert Hearts as an example, so successful. It's like, well, what do? They bring all the the Desert Hearts mini stage everywhere with them.
Yeah.
They have the little heart disco ball,
Yeah.
that spins around, things like that. Dirty Bird, they have the eggs, and so those kinds of things really that it's a Dirty Bird party, or that it's a Desert Hearts party, or Elro
Right.
also, for example, has
Oh,
a
yeah.
very specific vibe that they have at all of their events.
Right.
That it's sort of on brand.
Yeah. Yeah, it's whether you're a DJ or a venue or a party promoter or planner. I mean, having something like that, like a lot of people too. I mean, you see it's like Dead Mouse with his head mask, mouse mask or whatever, or the Dirty Bird egg. I mean, having these things, these kind of iconic things that last. I mean, it's if you nail that, it can really aid in your longevity, I suppose. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's interesting too. I've recently started to think a lot about things that I never really wanted to think about, like having a specific brand and sort of like the marketing aspect, and also how that looks on social media as an artist, because ultimately that stuff does matter. It doesn't really matter whether or not we appreciate or like it or think that it's tacky, which I don't think it is at all. I mean, it just is what it is, right? Like, as an artist, you have a specific brand and you have certain aesthetics that people know, and recognize as being part of who you are. But, it's something that I've really started to think about. For example, I don't have a logo yet. I've never wanted to make one, but that's something that I realized, like, I need a logo for next year, and some of these little, kind of marketing and branding things that are important.
It's difficult. It's really difficult. I mean, especially when you're a musician or a DJ and you just, you all you want to focus on is the music. For this podcast, I put a considerable amount of thought into the branding and what I wanted it to be, because I've had branding experiences through my own aliases and that sort of thing. That it was cool for a while, but again, with like coming up with an alias, like I wanted to have something that was lasting, that I wouldn't be, because that's a big part of how you present yourself, right? When you send something to somebody, even just having the album cover art is like a kind of a big deal, right? Because it's the first thing that people are going to notice, and what I've kind of settled on is definitely, even if you're on a budget, right? Like, this, I don't have a ton of budget for this podcast because a lot of this stuff is, expensive and years of saving and that sort of thing. But, starting off with something like a good logo, and that's what I did with the podcast, is getting the voice of electronic music. And I have a buddy, Robert Mine, who does a lot of stuff for 1015 and a lot of these big festivals and stuff, and he's really, really great dude. And so he did the logo for the podcast, and having that and having the parts of it, I really felt like, okay, this is something good I can start with, and I can run with that. I wanted it had to be something that was good, even just a little bit. It had to be something good that I felt good about. And then, of course, I was able, the rest of it, I try to let my kind of intuition guide me a little bit, right? Like with the steamy streets for the intro and that sort of thing. That was just me going out and into the San Francisco streets and the Fide North Beach area, and I knew kind of what I wanted ish, and just drove around literally until I found some like steamy great thing, which was like, hey, there it is, But a lot of it's kind of two parts, right? Like figuring out kind of what you want in the general ballpark, and then from there just kind of letting it evolve, And this is something for my music. I'd really like to sit down with like a brand. They have these companies that do like branding and marketing and stuff. And for the podcast, it was a little bit easier because I'm a little bit removed from it, But something like my music, I'm so involved in it, and there's so much time that goes into producing this stuff, and it can be almost a little bit difficult for me to take a step back and be like, okay, what's a good look for this? You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I think what's nice, too, with San Francisco is because we have a lot of people who they go out and they're diehard music fans. A lot of them are, senior graphic designers or photographers and that kind of a thing. You can always find someone who's willing to help you. And, if need be, particularly if you are, someone like me that I don't have a ton of money, like someone who's really going to do you a favor and like give you like the homie price, as I say,
right.
Because they really want to help you. There's also people that are, professional. For example, someone who's really good is this guy, Filo Rueda. He's actually in Colombia. I think he's in Bogota. And he does all the artwork for Funk and Deep Records, also for Renesanz, which is the other one that I'm signed to. Also produces, is a really cool producer. His sound is really funky and dark, and I really like him. But, again, because he's in Colombia, his rates are like really competitive, and the work that he does is insane. So he's someone, for example, that luckily, just because of leveraging my network, I'm in contact with, and yeah, he does some really good work. He's done some flyers for some parties that I used to do. There's just a lot of people in the music scene that have multiple talents, and so
Yeah.
some of them they DJ and they're graphic designers, or they DJ and they're photographers, and a lot of people who actually, in a way, almost spread themselves a little too thin because they're really trying to do it all.
Mm.
But sort of whether people like it or not, the game has changed, and you really do need all these things. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of learning. This is kind of one of the lessons I've learned this year, is that some of those things that I was really not super interested in, or I thought was kind of unnecessary, and have started to finally take to heart and implement, have really helped me quite a bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's again, everybody just wants to focus on the music, but it can be really beneficial. And I think you kind of set yourself up for having a bit of an easier time if you do focus on a little bit of this stuff. And again, a reason to grow your network and go out to these events and be a part of a scene. You know what I mean? Because there are a lot of people that, hey, surprise, surprise, you're at a music event, and a lot of artists go out to these things. And I've always been, I've been really big on paying people for their stuff. Even if it is, I appreciate a homie hookup, for sure. But sometimes I'll tell people, look, I just want to pay you what your rate is. You know what I mean? Because I understand what it is to be an artist, and it can be difficult, because everybody, especially some people don't understand. They think that they don't understand what goes into this stuff. You know what I mean? Whoa, logo is $350, and it's like, well, the amount of time and consideration that goes into it. And what's the old adage where it's like, there's something broken on a submarine, and this, engineer expert comes in and walks down and taps it with a hammer. He's like, oh, it's fixed. That'll be $4,000. And the submarine owner's like, oh, $4,000. He's like, well, you're paying me for the 15 years of experience. You're not paying me for the 15 minutes of time it took to hit the hammer,
Yeah, particularly with photography, I think people don't realize how much time. First of all, the lenses are thousands of dollars.
Oh, Jesus, yeah.
So that's not cheap, right?
Yeah.
And then also the time they spend editing and that kind of a thing. And even if, for example, you're just playing a set for an hour or whatever, that's still they can't book a ton of gigs in that night. Maybe they can run over to yours and do one double booking, but it's not easy. So yeah, but at the same time, I think what is really cool about particularly the San Francisco scene is that people really are wanting to build each other up.
Right.
That's sort of goes back to my thing about why do I like it here? Why do I feel so at home here? It's because people are not stepping on each other. It's if I'm doing well, it's not like there's a pie and that's the success pie, and now
Right.
There's not enough left for you.
Exactly. It's not a pie. There's
Yeah.
success. There could be success for everybody for the most part. I suppose not every single person on the planet. There's only so much attention that people have. But I know what you mean. It's much less of a crabs in the bucket type of thing. Because and I always reference this because I'm a big fan of Joe Rogan's podcast. But what he always talks about is the scene in stand-up comedy, especially in LA, was. Back in the day, I guess, before kind of podcasting got big, and stand-up comedy's in a huge boom right now. These stand-up is just massive compared to what it's always been, which is fantastic. But that's something he remarks on, is that the culture, everyone's kind of putting each other on and supporting each other, and everything is just better when you do that. Because there's no reason to. To knock people down and that sort of thing, and it's more cohesive, and it's not a battle, it's not a race.
One of the kind of things I've realized is as I have continued to build myself up in San Francisco, there maybe have been, and it's not a lot of people, but some people who have maybe been a little bit, I guess, maybe resentful or something, because and it's really a bummer. I'm sympathetic to it. I don't take offense to it at all, but everyone wants to do this, right? Everyone wants to be playing on these shows and playing out all the time.
Right.
And as you kind of continue to get booked more and more, some people question well, why am I not on that show? Why did I not get picked? But I actually had a really funny talk with Michael Bricker. He and I have. He's a really funny guy. I always tell him he's one of my favorite residents here. we talk about some really funny stuff, and he's been in this for a lot longer than I have, so he has like some words of wisdom, and he's also very dark and sarcastic. But he sent me something, and it was like, if someone gets something, like, don't question why, like, just work harder.
Right.
And I've really taken that to heart this year. Like, you really don't need to be like that. You just work harder, and you think about, like, well, what are they doing that I'm not doing, or how can I improve myself? For me, like, really, I think all that I did, I came here. I had one, like I said, I had one friend. I met all these people organically. People put me on, actually, in the beginning, like, definitely not. I didn't have any signed releases or anything at that point. Like, I just was, someone that they liked and they wanted to give a chance to.
Right.
But what I did is I took it really seriously. And the thing is, like, I'm repeating myself a bit, but you really do have to pull.
Yeah.
So what did I do? I was like, okay, this is my first show at whatever place. I really need you to come and support me. One of the, for example, how I got my residency with Social AM is my girlfriend at the time had her sister and all her friends come out. So I did the opening set. So I literally had 22 people waiting at the door at 1:50 for the venue to open for me to start playing.
Wow.
So it's like that showed a lot. Like, yeah, I actually am pulling. I have people here that want to see me.
Yeah.
So, that I just won party with them and I got a residency.
Right.
So, you always have to, like, let friends know, like, this is my dream. I really, like, need you to be here at my show. Come and support me. This is my first time I'm getting put on. And things like that make a really big impression.
For sure. And, in giving, too, I mean, this could be said for anything, whether it's business or whatever endeavor it is you do, but, giving in a scene and giving back to people is crucial. And that's, the best way to establish yourself and have people kind of take you seriously, right? I mean, like you said, why are these people getting on this party bill and that sort of thing, and why are they playing and I'm not? And it's, that's how I got my start in the scene. Is I kind of had a bit of a difficulty, a little bit, not much, but I had a little tricky time kind of figuring out, okay, well, how do I get into the scene, and how do I get myself, established, so to speak. At one point, I was just like, look, I'm just going to throw my own party, right? And if I take the time and put in the effort to throw my own party, then I can invite people to my party, and I'm doing something for them. I'm putting this thing on, and our party was for sure out of pocket almost every time.
Oh yeah.
But you put this thing on, and everyone has a good time, and you can invite people, and they can play, and that's exciting for them, and you're kind of helping them out, and then in turn they'll invite you to their party that they're going to play at, and really kind of it goes a long ways.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think when you do have your own party, you can always leverage booking swaps.
Yeah.
But what's funny about the culture of that is, there are some people that will very clearly state, like, hey, I want to book you for mine, and then you get me on yours. And so they have a very clearly established transaction. But generally, that's not how it works. It's usually like, okay, I'm going to book you, and then you sort of hope to get booked back. What I will say is I've put a lot of people on Afterhours, and I definitely have not gotten booked back. And honestly, like, don't think that I ever will.
Yeah.
But it's fine. That's actually not why I did it. I did it because, like, they're my friends, and I want them to play. I understand that, like, they might have a party where they have very particular residents they're involved, and I do get to play pretty often, so they're probably thinking about putting other people on. So you can't let that be something that upsets you or whatever, or like, I've had some friends who do parties, like, they're unhappy because they've booked someone and they've never gotten booked back, and they've commented about it. But generally, like, the culture is that you give, and then you hope that it comes back to you, and usually it does. Sometimes in other ways, but that's sort of how it goes.
Well, if you give out of in a transactional type of mindset where you're I'll do this if you do that for me, then it kind of the essence gets lost, right? I mean, you kind of want to selflessly give because you want to, because and that's, I think people just like, sending the Facebook message, and if you're copy and pasting, like, people are very sensitive to these things.
Yeah.
Just doing something because you love it, that's where things really, become apparent. Like, oh, this person's just doing this, out of their own time and their own pocket because they really care,
Oh yeah. One thing I really tried to focus on this year too is I really am trying to help a lot of girls out that I know are trying to play. I'm really sensitive to that because I was raised mostly by my single mom, so I was again like something I take very seriously. Another thing I've talked to about a lot of girls too is it's different, right? Because there's so many. I think that it's the statistics are like maybe it's 10% of the industry or even less than that are women, so they don't have as much support. Like they don't have all their guy friends that are DJing that they can play with who show them like here's how to do it, and like they can share best practices and that kind of a thing. So it's actually kind of sad, and so it's like same thing with education, right? Like there are certain marginalized groups that generally don't succeed in college. So there's like the whole affirmative action thing. Like you really, really need to actually give them more support and that kind of a thing. So yeah, I mean, there have been like, a few of my friends that are girls where I've been like, oh, come over and hang out and like let's play, and I'll like, because I'm a teacher, so I love like sharing best practices, and I will coach and I will like get people ready. I've done that for a few girls that I've either been on an after hours booking with them and it's their first time playing, and like we've hung out for like 3 or 4 hours. I've like showed them music and that kind of a thing. And I will say I do pride myself on my teaching skills because I can put in like 4 and 5 hours, and it's like all of a sudden like it's like wow, they really like have sharpened up. Like their EQing has gotten super sharp. Like they're always in phrase. Like they know, like they don't need to count or anything. Like they just know exactly what to do.
Feel it.
Like the mixes are like not abrupt, and all of a sudden it's like they're just killing it.
Right.
So that makes me really happy. Yeah. But I think it's funny. Like there are a lot of parties in San Francisco that they do all female lineups and that kind of a thing, and then like that I think that's cool, right? But then some people will call it out like, oh well, they're just doing it like because they they're trying to capitalize, or they have all kinds of shade to throw.
Yeah.
Which is like why it's a cool thing.
Right.
For example, there's Evita Salazar. She does Good Call. She does the party at Monroe. She does Super Vixen, which is an all-female lineup party. They do parties at F8. My friends Ali and Nina are some of the residents. They do some really good parties, so those kinds of things are cool. There's the other one that is Noctuary. They do like all-female and like LGBT lineups. That's more like techno and kind of harder. And they have a pretty good community that they do, and they're not doing parties all the time, but there's a few of them that are pretty notable in San Francisco.
Right. It's I mean, I haven't had any difficulty, finding plenty of women to come on for the podcast, and we seem to have a lot of female DJs here, and I think it's awesome that it's becoming much more normalized. You know what I mean? Some of my favorite DJs are chicks. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And some of them, my friend Katie Stone, like I always talk about her. She is constantly layering tracks, and I'm like, fuck, that's like. In my mind, like that's one of the most difficult things you can do as a DJ, and for her, it's just like the de facto. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And like you mentioned like the all-female DJ lineup, and it's like, oh, surprise, surprise. A lot of DJ or club nights are the whole bill is all dudes. You know what I mean? So I think it's awesome, and just seeing a lot of women out there. My friend. Kelsey is an amazing DJ. She plays here all the time. She goes by Ampersand.
Oh yeah, she's really cool.
Yeah, super good. So I love it. It's just there's no shortage of equality here in San Francisco. But I think it is good to kind of constantly be working on it and kind of keeping that in mind. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I mean that's the thing about San Francisco is. We do have there's a lot of people who DJs, like I'll be at parties and it's almost like too many DJs, but a lot of them are like really good, they kill it. It's funny though, because especially when I'm hanging out with a bunch of industry people and there's these like open deck situations, I generally tend to like step back.
Yeah.
Because a lot of this is like not to say anything mean, but a lot of people are like so thirsty. It's like they want to be playing all the time.
Right.
I was like that when I first started playing. It was like I just want it to be me. It's the me show starring me and co-hosted by me and produced by me and also guest starring me. But
right.
as I've been able to play out more and more now, it's like. I'm just like, you guys entertain me because you guys are sick. Like, I just
Right.
want you guys to play it. I just kick it, you
Yeah.
know? It's like, I just want to relax and hear what you have to do. And actually, for me, too, like, as a DJ, it's nice for me to hear other people's tracks as
Right.
well.
And
Because it's
enjoy
like,
yourself.
okay, like, this is a sick one. Like, I might start playing this. Or,
Right.
you know, what's really the best compliment, too, is when you're playing, or, like, you know, also as a compliment to someone else who's playing, is just to straight up be like, okay, this is sick. Like, who is this? And that's how
Yeah.
you discover music out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. I'm kind of the same way. You know, I think too. Like once you've played out enough places, you're like, oh, I just want to kind of enjoy myself. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know. But also too, you know, imagine a world where nobody's a DJ in non-DJ scenes or non-music scenes. You know, you kind of up to the whim of whatever person's musical taste that is. It could be anything, right?
Yeah.
But like at the parties that we go to, it's like everyone's a DJ. So anyone steps up to play music, and it's probably going to be a pretty good selection. You know?
Oh yeah. I mean, obviously the barriers to entry are substantially less than what they were even when I first learned, which was like 10 years ago in high school. Because now instead of getting these really expensive CDJs, like you can get an XDJ, which is actually not a bad piece of equipment
I think
at
they're
all.
great.
They're fine, like especially because you can take them on a plane and that kind of a thing.
Yep.
So instead, this setup is what, like $6K for the 4 decks and the mixer. The XDJ, you can get a used one for like $1,000, and so you can actually like get good. I mean, that's the one thing too, is you have to have your own setup, or at least have access to one,
Right.
to get good enough to be able to play out. You have to have access to that's how you work in the studio, as far as like making your own mixes and like listening back to them and getting practice so that you're comfortable. And then eventually you do get to the point where you've played out long enough and you can like not play for a few months and just step back on the decks and you're fine. But you do, I mean, it's like, what is it, like the 10,000 hour rule or whatever? Like you need to, those hours are obviously not going to be spent at booked events. It's just going to be at home, or again, like when you are out with friends, or you're like having, a kickback or whatever, and it's just you and friends playing together.
Right. It really is important. My roommate Ryan is a DJ, and we have our whole little garage set up, which I call the Rave Cave, or we call the Rave Cave, and it's got an XDJ set up in there, and it's great. I mean, throughout the week he'll go down there and he'll just be playing tunes or whatever, and I'll go down and pop some on, and we have these parties where we'll all take turns playing, and it really, especially in those environments too, like kind of getting comfortable, especially if you're getting started in DJing. It's a good way to kind of, it's low stakes. It's not a lot to be lost if you fuck up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always some funny times where, it's like 4 and 5 a.m. and someone's really drunk and they're just train wrecking all the time.
Yeah.
Just unmercifully.
Right.
That can be a little much, but I mean, no one cares. It's not a big deal. Like I think it's funny.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, actually, I might have experienced that last night. Actually.
Oh yeah.
And then it was maybe like 7 a.m. So that's what happens. You sort of lose that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's what's a lot of fun. I mean, what's cool about the XDJ too is that you can record, very easily from it.
Yeah.
So I've had these sessions where I've played with my friend Avi, who is again one of the GCODE founders, and we'll play for like 3 or 4 hours. And we've actually had we had one that we put out as a series called Melodic Oasis, that is more like melodic techno and sort of deep, techno and that kind of a thing, with sort of like an ethnic, because we're both Middle Eastern, so those kind, like the sort of like sitar and those kinds of sounds.
I fucking love sitar.
Yeah, like that. We love that. So we had one that literally like the whole mix was usable. Like we literally were in a flow for 3 hours. So we put it out, and then we actually got reached out to about someone that wants to feature it. So it's cool. I mean, again, like that's why we have an influx. It's not like it used to be, where there were only these resident DJs and not too many people knew how to do this. That, for a lot of the old school DJs, has actually been something that upsets them. And I have a lot of respect for old school DJs, and I think like with San Francisco, I've always vibed very well with them, and a lot of them have actually really complimented me because they like my selection or whatever, and I go out. I mean, I'm like an end up in some of these parties where the crowd is much older and I'm vibing with them, and they hear me play and they really like and respect me, so I appreciate that a lot. But it's just different now because there's so many people that can do this that you can't necessarily be like a full-time DJ anymore, especially not in San Francisco. There's just no way. I mean, it's for a lot of people, it's a hobby. You can't really even if you have a label, necessarily be doing this full-time, or even if you're touring as a DJ. I mean, a lot of people who have been in the scene for a long time, they have multiple jobs. Maybe they're doing, marketing or something like that. They're doing photography. You have to, these days, sort of have multiple things going for you.
Right.
I wish it could be the case that people could just DJ all the time and that was their full-time job. I mean, I would love to do that. But, it's only, in this industry, it's like the top 0.01% are able to do this.
Right. Even then, they're touring for the most part, and to be able to just make music off of DJing, you really do have to kind of tour and get outside of your bubble, so to speak. And I really do. I kind of feel like production is kind of necessary now too. Just because everything is being the floor is raising, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean it's funny. I had this talk yesterday with some people. Like, you kind of have to have clout, and like, how do you do that? It's generally because you are on some of these labels that put you on. Sometimes a lot of people, what they produce is not necessarily even what they sound like when they are playing out.
Right.
Their productions might be really deep and dark, and then they play really funky, and it can be really different. But yeah, that is kind of a piece to it. Or sometimes what they do is they just have a really, really successful party brand. Like, again, Desert Hearts. Like, I guess they have each of them have a few productions out. Not a ton. I mean, not even like multiple a year. But their party brand is so successful that they've got that going for them, and so they take the party on tour.
Right.
So you can't just do one thing. You have to do like 2 or 3 things.
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of have to be multifaceted, I guess. What is the sound of Desert Hearts if you had to categorize it?
Well,
is it techno or house?
Because they say house and techno, but I mean, there's not really like. I'll be honest.
It's more of a vibe, right?
I don't think there's a lot of techno. It's more like it's more tech housey for sure.
Yeah.
They will have, if you go to the festival, like in the later night, Marbs plays techno for sure. That's why he has Desert Hearts Black, which we had one of the parties here, actually. That was one of the first Desert Hearts Black ones. So it's like Marbs and Renesanz and Evan Casey, who's also based out in San Diego. He's really cool. He will come out here and play a bit. They're all San Diego based.
Oh, yeah.
Which is funny. Their home base is actually Spin Nightclub. That's where they started doing some of their parties in San Diego. So, just sort of from being out there, they sort of got expanded in California, and now, they're going to multiple states. And
we'll do the festival too, right? Desert
yeah,
Hearts
they
festival,
have the festival. They used to do it twice a year, but then they dialed it back to one, which I think was probably the right move. It's hard to do two.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think that, with them, it is more like, the sort of like underground housey kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Tech house, it's funny because tech house is becoming, some people say it's like tech house is becoming the new EDM because, what happens if you look on Beatport? It used to be like Tiesto and all these EDM people, or like Porter Robinson or, these names were the ones that were in like the top charts. Right. Now it's not like that. It's
now
like Solardo and Fisher and Camel Fat.
Right.
Or like when Dirty Bird has a really big release. So that's crazy. It's crazy to think that that's what it's like. But, Tech House is definitely like going to continue to kill it. I think it's going to really, just continue to have this momentum that will grow. I think that for me, I do have certain parties where I will not play techno. I'll play tech house because that's what the promoter wants, and I'm totally fine with it. But for me, techno is like, as a DJ, like you have that sort of one sound or that one genre where it's like you really, really relax and you're totally feeling it and you get super energized. And particularly with DJing, again, like you just get into that trance where you like, again, you're like layering tracks and you don't have to think anymore and you're getting really experimental. And for me, it's like that's when I play techno for sure. That's when I get into that. that comfort zone.
I'm spilling. Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, tech house is it's definitely like it's a huge, I don't want to say a resurgence, but it's massively popular right now. I personally tend to think, I don't know, I mean, people calling it like EDM or whatever. I tend to think of EDM, as you want to call it, as the vibe, I suppose, kind of more like ravey. You know what I mean? And like, you think about like EDC. EDC is definitely more kind of ravey. You're going to have a lot more, techno or trancey stuff, and like, Porter Robinson. He's not really, trancier at all, but I don't know. Certain genres kind of have one foot in the underground a little bit more, and I feel like tech house definitely retains that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, Camel Fat, for example,
I fucking love
was
Camel
here
Fat.
for my birthday. It was Camel Fat and Dorley. It was, I think, 2 years ago. And what was really cool about them is, like, as the night got later and later, like, especially around, like, the 2 to 4 hours, they actually started to play, like, really dark techno. And I was like, oh, shit, this is sick. Like, this is really cool. It wasn't really what I expected from them. So that was really dope. Yeah, that was a really, really good party for sure.
Right. Yeah, I love what Camel Fat's doing. I really love what Gorgon City is doing. I mean, I guess it's technically tech house, but it has more of a kind of classic house vibe to it, to me. Camel Fat a little bit more poppy. With the vocals, and Gorgon City has definitely like this like kind of 90s vibe. They throw in some of those like 90s samples and stuff. I just fucking love it. I really love it. I would like to make, and I do make kind of stuff a little bit like that on my tech housey side, but I would really love to work with more like vocalists and have some more like poppy vocals and feel good, like use more like, the classic, was it M8 piano sound or whatever, that classic house piano.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I always joke about, like, why did I get really turned off from EDM? It was one that they started to do. I call it the Tiesto trumpet, where it would be like, it's like, I'm just like,
Right.
no. I'm just like, okay,
Right.
I don't think I'm feeling this anymore. Like,
Right.
I want to go home.
Well, it's funny because there are some sounds, and some genres are a little bit more okay with using kind of more. It all comes down to taste, right? It's all subjective, but there are some sounds that are a little bit more mainstreamy, a little bit more. I don't know, and a lot of like I love trance music, but a lot of some of the trance these days, and not all trance, but so some of the stuff that's like really popular has kind of these kind of stereotypical sounds in them, and I personally am more drawn to these like, people that select these sounds that are kind of like, oh, this is new, this is interesting, like what is that, Techno recently has done a lot of that. Techno's sound lately has been very dark, and I really like it. And I say this all the time. It's a dark sound, but it's not a dark feeling. You know what I mean? There's still energy there. There's still like excitement, and it's fun. But a lot of the synths they're using and this kind of driving like boom, 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 and it's tasteful.
Yeah, I mean, especially like with the kick, like the sort of, there's like the signature like drum code kick that's like very, very heavy,
Right.
and that kind of a thing. But it is very energizing, and so that's why, like, when people are dancing, they're, it's very like animated and punchy and that kind of a thing,
Yeah.
which I really like. It's very cool. I mean, I resonate with it a lot, and I also really like a lot of like the dark, kind of stabs and that kind of a thing. It's very playful in a way.
Yeah.
I also think too that compared to tech house, the percussions in techno are actually like a little bit more complicated in a way. Because again, like, yeah, the kick is obviously like a bit repetitive, but that being said, it's a lot of the other elements that get really cool. And
Right.
with tech house, for example, what I really like is more like the sort of Elro sound, or more like UK, where they have sort of these like kind of more playful like claps and that kind of a
Yeah.
thing, and it's really like perky. It's different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with for example, like the sort of the tech house here, it's a little bit like Dirty Bird, for example. It's more like bassy and kind of like these wonky, like, almost wubby kind of sounds.
Right.
But yeah, no, I'm more into like the sort of like poppy,
Right,
like
right.
That's what's really cool.
I do love the playfulness that Dirty Bird introduced into Tech House, and someone said a while back that I thought was interesting, that they thought that Dirty Bird kind of brought this house music, of course, sound, but put they took the kind of hyphy movement vibe, the kind of playfulness and the weird sounds that like Mac Dre would use, and they kind of throw that into the mix with their house music, and I can totally see it. So a lot of the stuff that like Mac Dre would use are these weird little weird little squonky synths and stuff like that, and you could definitely hear it when you listen to. And whether I don't know if that's the actual case or not, or if they consciously did that, but kind of makes sense to me, because I'm with you. I like the play, even if it's a dark techno track and there's kind of some more like playful elements. I love that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I think what's cool, for example, like Funk and Deep, I really like because the sound is very groovy. Shane Fontaine, who again was one of the residents here, has a track on there that's called Bump.
Yeah.
And so Mike Lee actually, I guess, recorded the lyrics. So it's literally about doing a bump. And it's like, oh shit, where'd everybody go? Yeah. So I love that. I heard that when we were doing After Hours, and yeah, I'll rinse that one out every once in a while. It's really funny.
Absolutely. I love references like that. I mean, there's with electronic music too, there's no rules, you know what I mean? Like if you and little things like that almost become kind of memes, that can work their way into a funny lyric or something. Like it's just great,
Yeah.
I always think about the classic Timbaland bed squeaking sound, he used in that Aaliyah track, that stuff like that. They really do. They become memes and have a life of their own.
Yeah. So what's actually funny? So Timbaland collaborated with Nelly Furtado on one of the albums that came out when I was in high school. I'm trying to remember how it goes, but there's something about like, when I'm in the party, everybody throw up their hands.
Yeah.
Something about that. So Matt Cesari actually has a remix of that's coming out next year.
Oh, shit.
So his manager posted this video, and then he reposted it of him playing that. And so I messaged him, and I'm like, dude, what is this remix? And he's like, oh, just wait. And so, yeah, that's really funny. So there's actually kind of this movement now with the music where they're either re-singing old lyrics, so it's not the original vocals, but they're like, and sometimes it's just like a little tidbit, so it's something kind of familiar, or again, it's like these remixes of like pop music. But I actually love that stuff. It's funny because it's like you make, especially like the dance floor, they're hearing something that they recognize, but it's not what they recognize, but there's like that little bit of familiarity to it,
right?
And so that really like can kind of wrangle people in, which is funny.
Yeah, well, I think by re-recording it, you get away with, or you get around one part of the copyright thing. So there's taking it as a direct sample, but if you use the idea and you re-record it, it gets much more difficult, to do a copyright claim. But then there's tracks like Jolene by Claude Von Stroke, and I wonder if half of the people listening even know I don't know if it's a reference to the original Jolene track, but that was definitely, I don't remember who made the original track, but stuff like that, it throws back a little bit, a lot of like hip hop elements and that sort of thing. And if you do it well, it can really go off and really kind of just set the mood for a track.
Yeah, that track's really funny. So it's really funny because I really don't, like if I'm getting ready for a tech house set, I actually spend so much more time than I have to for a techno set because I really have to like sift through everything that's out there.
Right.
But a lot of the bookings I've done have been techno, so I haven't really been looking at tech house lately. And so I heard that Jolene track. Actually had no idea what it was. Like literally had no idea that it was the Get Real track where it was him and Curtis, Green Velvet.
Right.
So I heard Sacha Robati play it, and then the next weekend someone who was opening here played it. And I make this post. I'm like, what's this Jolene track that everyone's been playing?
I just
got like, everyone's like, are you serious? I'm like, no, I actually don't know what it is. So that was pretty funny.
That's hilarious.
I know. Then people are saying that it's like it's the Losing It of 2019.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Yeah, but it actually is a pretty good track.
It is.
I'm down.
Right. A lot of times it warrants the attention, right? I mean, even losing it it's a great fucking track, and I think it becomes, people roll their eyes a little bit when it's like, it becomes a thing where it's the dude bro that's requesting Fisher at every, any given set, and it's like, oh, this isn't, that gets played out too much or whatever,
Yeah, especially with some of the after hours parties I've done. Well, I will say, like, everyone is cool, but there are occasionally some people that get, like, a little bit too drunk. So there was one girl, we had to kick her out. Like, I don't ever like to do that, but she was being, like, aggressive. She, like, was not gonna, like, take no for an answer. So my friends are playing before me. Niall and Lorenzo, they're sound lifting. They've been playing out in the city for a really, really long time. So she was doing it to them, like holding up the phone and like was not gonna like leave them alone. And then I get up and I don't know, my presence is more like I say, I'm a little bit more inviting and that kind of a thing. But she was like not gonna leave me alone, and I didn't say anything. But they were like, okay, like this girl is like really like bothering you, and she bothered us. So yeah, we had to ask her nicely to leave. But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it's funny, right? Because in Vegas, the culture is different. Like, you get tipped if you're DJing. Like, it's totally like people will just come up to the booth and give you like $100, or sometimes they'll request a song. Or
I need to play out in Vegas.
Yeah, we don't have that here. I don't know why. I would love. For $100, I will play whatever you want.
Right.
I will play the Barney song for you if I have it.
Well, when when Mark Ribley was here, people were throwing money up on the DJ booth, and it was almost like he was a stripper at the end of the night. Like, he was collecting like bills, and I'm like, what?
That's hysterical.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
Tip your DJs.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
right.
We need to start doing that. That's the message of this podcast.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Cool, man. Well, we're over 2 hours now. And it's been fantastic. I'm starting to wind down a little bit. This weekend has been rough a little bit. I'm kind of getting over a cold, too, so my energy's not super peak.
We had to reschedule because I lost my voice. There's definitely, we call it the rave flu that goes around,
Yeah.
Especially with San Francisco. Our clubs are small. It's not like L.A. or these things where they're these massive clubs. I mean, we get a pretty healthy amount of people here at Halcyon, but this is like... We're in the tight, intimate spaces together. So yeah, it's been a long one.
Yeah.
This lifestyle in this industry is not for the faint of heart. But
right.
It's a good one. We have good times, so it makes it worth it.
Absolutely, I'll take it every time. And yeah, your immune system could be a little compromised as well.
Yeah.
That's we had a party, a going away party a couple weeks ago, and I think that's where I got sick because Ryan Michael Robbins was like, "Bro, I got so sick after that party." I was like, "Me too, man." Like, someone must have sneezed on the decks or something.
Yeah, it happens, and then we're all just in here.
Right. Yeah, soaking it up. Cool, man. Well, you got anything you want to plug? Your SoundCloud or?
Yeah. So on social media, I'm /DJ Dominic M. I also do have an upcoming release on Nightshift Records that will be scheduled for early next year. They're really cool. Sammy Kubu runs it, so they're based out in Brighton. Have really cool sound. One of my favorite producers who's kind of like young up and coming is Kleins or K-Lines. I'm actually not entirely sure. But, he's someone who's also in Funk and Deep. I've been playing his stuff out a lot, so through him I discovered that label. So that's a really good one. And, for those of you who are local and appreciate Halcyon, I'll be doing one show that I can't announce yet, but we do have the February 1st one with Mado, so that's going to be a really good one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's going to be great. I can't wait. And we got New Year's Eve. We got Crystal Method on New Year's Eve, which is going to be insane. Like, bucket list item for me.
That's insane. That's going to be a really good one.
It's going to be so sick. I mean, that's just my entire life I wanted to see them, and I'll be able to be here doing the lights, so I'm excited. Cool. Well, I do want to mention that I have started a Patreon now, so if you want to support us, if you like what we're doing here, check that out. I believe it's patreon.com/Scott Brio. I'll have to check that out, but if not, you can just search Patreon and Scott Brio, and anything that you can donate will help massively. Because again, I'm just I really I love doing this, and I want to get more additional people on, maybe travel a little bit, and have people travel to us. And so that will just any donation that you give will make that easier and get more exciting episodes. So this has been episode number 46 with Dominic M. I'm Scott Brios, the voice of Electronic Music Podcast. We're on basically every major streaming platform, so you can just Google it. We're on Spotify, SoundCloud, Podbean, all of them. And this is Halcyon on 11th Street. If you're in the area, come check it out. I got to thank Gina, Rhea, Mikey Payton, Dean Samaras for letting us host here, and the rest of the team. And I'm Scott Brio. We will see you guys on the next one. Peace out.